Good day and good evening, and welcome to Walk and Talk with me, Caetsu Chaiji, but you can just call me Kai. On these kind of streams, what happens is I will choose somewhere we're going, and then we just walk there. And while we're walking there, is the perfect time if you have a question for me, if there's something you would like to discuss, like if there's some interesting topic. It could also be something like that you're specifically interested in hearing from me, but sometimes my answer might be uninteresting. Sometimes there might be a lot of questions, so I miss it. But that is essentially what this is about. When we reach our destination, which, well, I know where we're going, and some of you might know where we're going as we make our way there, then we will look at some clips that have been posted by, well, some of you. And if you want me to review your clip in the future, then there is a room specifically for that called Clip Review on the Discord community server. And that is kind of that. We are on Ravana Materia on OCE, so if you want to walk with me, you can. Everywhere can visit OCE, so you can just come. And we will start from exactly here. And let me just get my backpack. We might as well start walking. And with that said, hey Harris, hey Fatman, hey Tina Lee, hey Tom, hey Giraheen, hey Philippe, hey Seras, hey Kazu Dragoon, hey Jake, hey Fed, hey Aradel, hey Agent Monica, and hey Liv. Hope you're all doing very well. Wow. It's a long walk, I think. I'm checking if we had a really long walk as one of the first ones, but I think we did this specific walk. This might give away where we're going, but if you know, you know. If you don't know, you will be surprised, I guess. But we did this specific walk as one of the first ones, but because it was one of the first ones, I don't think we, like, took time on it super well, maybe. So I'd like to see how long it actually would be if we did it right by the extremely strict standards of these walks. Hey Guzzle, hey Zerno, hey Zav, hope you're doing well. But yeah, that is that. Let me think if I can remember one of the subjects that I might want to talk about. Oh yeah, first one is at some point in the stream Tuesday we had some frame drops. Hopefully it doesn't happen again, but if it doesn't, then that would be classic. I'm pretty sure this exact scenario happened last time too. There was frame drops, and the next stream there was nothing. Which is always fun. An interesting, like, subject, I guess, that someone brought up on my samurai guide, which I hadn't actually. I have considered it a little bit, but not like talked about in like hugely. It's not Kaiten, but yeah, F for Kaiten. But no, the thing they brought up was, what is the point of an odd minute burst when there are no odd minute buffs left to have? For some jobs who have their own personal 1 minute burst, like a paladin with fight or flight, it makes perfect sense that they have a 1 minute burst because, you know, obviously, bard songs? Would that justify a 1 minute burst? Yeah, kind of. A little bit like that. It's random discussion, Q&A, and then when we reach our destination, it's also a stream where I review some clips that you sent me. So it's a little bit of everything. If you have a question, you're welcome to ask, and I'll try my best to answer it. I'll usually finish what I'm talking about before I jump to another one, if it doesn't like merge in nicely. The 1 minute burst, where would Bart be in 1 minute? Bart 1 minute in would be around a third through their mage's ballad. So a 1 minute burst would happen to be situated in mage's ballad. Wouldn't you want most of your damage to be during Wanderer's Minuet anyways? Yeah, something like that, right? Something like that. But if you use everything, if it's Aratel, they would be in panic mode in 1 minute. Oh no. If you use your burst, like your opener, then you don't have anything for about a minute. Some jobs have something sooner. The particular case with Samurai, for instance, is that if you... Like, for instance, an argument you could make is, why is it you use Meikyu Shisui once every minute? Why don't you use 2 of them every 2 minutes? Wouldn't that be better? And the answer to that is, well, Meikyu Shisui's cooldown is 55 seconds. Not 1 minute. So it's actually really awkward to make both of them fit. This also happens for Machinist and Reassemble. You kind of just use 1 every minute, and that's good enough. And for some jobs, it is genuinely a case of, well, it doesn't really matter, so you'll just use it. For other jobs, I think the biggest selling factor of the odd minute burst is that a lot of cooldowns naturally align in a way that you can make some sort of symmetric, in a way, burst every minute, where the even minute is bigger, and then you have this like wave pattern. But this doesn't apply for all jobs. Exactly, Samurai is a good example. You could also the problem is we don't actually have that many jobs that function as good examples of this conversation, because some of the jobs have this burst naturally because you don't have a choice. Like Dark Knight, you could go, well, you don't have a 1 minute burst? No, but Delirium has a 1 minute cooldown, so you're kind of using that anyway, right? You could go... well, Sage doesn't have a 1 minute burst, no, but you only can hold 2 Flemmers anyway, right? Or... And then Samurai comes up, Viper comes up, Machinist comes up, and Black Mage comes up. The problem is with Black Mage is that Black Mage, well, that is actually not a problem. Black Mage is exactly a job that doesn't have anything to do in the 1 minute burst. They just kind of just keep bursting. And Machinist, they don't do anything either. Their 1 minute burst is, well, Chainsaw comes off cooldown there, so I guess I use it. I feel like I'm forgetting something crucial here. You can see the path, but I'm pretty sure this isn't the way. Yep. I believe it's further down this way. Yeah. Or will it let you fall? I don't think it will. I don't quite remember. Does anyone remember the path? But yeah, that is the thing. That is why it kind of leads into this where Viper, you're like, well, you could use it anytime you want. And with Samurai, does anyone remember? It looks like it might be over there. Samurai has a much more strict rotation, whereas Viper doesn't. What is... It does look like it's there. They found it. But yeah, that leads to this situation where Viper, you can use your 1 minute burst technically when you want. If some buff appears, a buff appears, then you can use it. Otherwise, you don't care. I think it also applies to Reaper in a way. And then Samurai is the odd one out, where it has the same kind of problem as Machinists Reassemble, but because it is a 55-second cooldown with 2 charges, so you can't quite make it work to make 2 of them every 2 minutes, because it will drift. But you can almost make it work. Almost. That is an interesting conversation. I also saw someone that said, couldn't you, you could, again, in the spirit of, is there any reason in doing a 1 minute burst specifically, couldn't you just use one of the make Shishisuis, just before it caps out, so that maybe you can bring the Kaishi Tendo Setsugeka, which is the super Midare that you get from Make Your Shisui, but specifically the Kaishi one that you get from doing the initial attack. Couldn't you carry that one to the 2 minute burst instead of carrying a regular Kaishi Midare Setsugeka? And there the idea is good. The thing is, I think the best thing I could say to that was, well, if your rotation pans out so that works and that makes sense, then that's not a bad idea, because if it doesn't hurt your 2 minute burst, then it probably benefits, and your 1 minute burst doesn't really care. Well, Fed, you can probably take it over multiple messages and try and explain what it is your question is. Bokaj says, do any job still buff others at the odd minute? That is precisely the origin of this problem, this question, Bokaj. The only odd minute buff we have remaining is an astrologian who happens to choose to play their odd minute card on the odd minute, which is not optimal. Optimally you wouldn't do that. So, if you're trying to optimize around something that isn't optimal, then who cares? Savik Faye says Ninja's Kunai's Bane. Savik Faye, Kunai's Bane is a personal damage buff. Mug is the one that affects the raid. Or Dokumori. There are no 1 minute raid buffs anymore. Alright, Jake. Enjoy. He lives as with Sage. It's probably easy. Smart Paladin hold on to fight or flight until 2 minutes. Oh no. See, with Sage it's probably easier to do both Flammers at once, so you don't accidentally use the 130 one on cooldown and not have it for the 2 minute burst. Well, yeah, that's the thing. Is that with Sage you can use the Flemmer you get around 40 to 1 minute 20 into the fight. You can kind of use anywhere in that time frame, and you will still have 2 Flemmers for the 2 minute burst if you only use one. There's of course the point that Flemmer is also, one of your better movement tools. It's better than Toxicon. Because you get a limited amount of Toxicons also. Oh, I see, Jake. So, you can do that with Flemmer. So, sometimes it is worth the potential burst damage loss for the mobility. This also applies to some other less mobile jobs, that sometimes you just throw your mobility option, which you would have been happy to have in your burst, because mobility was more important. Hyper's happier to use the access bar as True North number 3, though. Yeah, they can do that too. Let's see, Fed says, my static dissolved yesterday. We sat on M1S for almost 2 months. and things didn't look so good in M2S. We started as a fun casual group, but some members have set their goals a little higher in Dawntrail. The raid days became a little more tense when the same people failed at the same mechanics. Last week I switched from White Mage to Astro after only 2 weeks of Astro playtime. Now I've been invited by the raid leader. Oh. Weird. Now I've been invited by the raid leader to heal in his next performance-oriented static, but I'm really worried about not being good enough. That's why I'm currently watching countless Astra POVs from M1 and M2 to note down where I can best press which cooldowns. Astra really has fewer buttons than White Mage. Fewer options than White Mage. I'm also really afraid of Party Finder. Any advice? So, the first one is that, generally speaking, Astrologian is considered to be, like, really good at options, where White Mage has White Mage has slightly stronger buttons when they have a button. Astrologian is more the one where, like, interestingly, Scholar and White Mage is similar in that they have really big buttons, in my opinion, whereas Sage and Astrologian is more like the, like, you throw a bunch of things at the problem. So, like, that's one thing. In regards to your static situation, well, I am reasonably confident that the reason why your raid leader invited you to this more performance-oriented static is because they think you're good enough. They think you're good enough. Right? So you can start from there. I would also say if you have these concerns, you could ask that raid leader if you got invited just because you're there, or if they actually think that you would be able to, like, thrive in such an environment. Like, do they think you're good enough? Like, you could try that. If they say no, then then you have a bigger hill to climb, or you could just go, well, then I don't think I'm a good fit. If they say yes, then you know that what you're currently doing is satisfactory to that player. What they mean by performance-oriented static, hard to say. I don't know that raid leader, but let's say if I was leading, like, let's say if I made the static that we do on streams, and it took us 2 months to beat M1S, then I would probably, like, with the skill level that I'm at, I would probably, long before it had hit 2 months, I would probably have gone, guys, I don't think this is happening. Like, straight up, I don't think this is, like, this is not going to work. We'll have to try something else. I cannot summon my minion. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. Because I have a backpack on. Does it disappear when I put it on? Oh, it does. I forgot about that. We spent 5 months on A8S. Well, the difference there, Zaf, is don't you, like, in that group, don't you only go, like, once a week and only for a few hours? So, like, that also matters. And there's also a difference between being stuck on the final boss for months and being stuck on the first boss for months. Mavtato says I play red mage and I'm always bottom DPS. Is there any way to improve my damage? Is my class damage just naturally low? If you're looking at a DPS meter, right? Like, if you're looking at the DPS meter, then you're likely, if you're playing in a group of equally skilled players, then red mage is likely to be near the bottom, simply because red mage, like, is a little lower on personal damage. If you're always at the bottom and you play with different players of varying skill levels, then there might be some things you can do. Some things you can ask yourself. Red Mage is one of the weirder jobs to optimize, because sometimes you doing something wrong isn't obvious, because of the way the rotation works for Red Mage. Like, a huge part of Red Mage's damage, weirdly, stems from, I kid you not, making sure Flesh and Contra 6, you know, the two OGCDs, the blue ones, go out exactly on cooldown. Like, not, my GCD's up, I'll, like, they're ready now, I'll do it on the next opportunity. No, you're using things like acceleration and swift cast and melee combos to make sure that over the course of a 10-minute fight, potentially, Flesh and Contra 6, not a single time, drift as much as a second. This can add up over time. Like, let's say every time you can use Flesh, it takes you an extra GCD's worth of time because you keep drifting off. It takes you doing that 10 times, then you've lost a cast of Flesh. Even if you're, generally speaking, using it on cooldown, you've drifted it 25 seconds by doing just that. So that's one thing you can do if you're not already doing that. Another thing, and this is where it starts to get really awkward, Swift cast represents a damage gain for you. Acceleration represents a damage gain for you. So acceleration should at minimum be kept like on at most one charge, so that like you can keep getting the damage. And Swift cast, optimally speaking, like if you're doing it perfectly, Swift cast is used on cooldown every 40 seconds because it's a small damage gain. Now, whether that is actually optimal once you get into like the specifics of an actual fight, that's a different story. And the same applies to melee combos. Melee combos is a hugely mobile part of your rotation. So on the one hand, setting up a double melee combo leading up to the 2-minute burst, so like you get it perfectly. That, you know, that doesn't matter if the reason why you have those two melee combos is because you were moving and not casting for 15 seconds earlier because, oh, I have to save that melee combo. You know, doing something is better than doing nothing, so if you needed that melee combo for mobility, then you use that melee combo for mobility, and that's just the end of it all. Like, that's all you can do. So the long and the short of it is it's really hard to say, Maptato, but it is very possible that that's just where you are. Back to Fate's question. I would say the group you were already in, you said it is the same players that keep failing the same mechanics, possibly. I don't know the full story, but based on what you're telling me, I get the impression that there are some players in the initial static that might not be like cut out for Savage raiding. Like, they might not actually be strong enough players. And you sticking with them is basically wasting your potential fun. Like, if you're having fun with them, fine, but I'm just saying that if you're in a group that is still stuck on the first boss in the Savage raid tier for 2 months, that raid team will not finish. Like, you did say it took you 2 months to beat it, so that's not quite the story, right? But if it took them 2 months to beat it, it will, like, given that the difficulty is presumably increasing as you go through. That isn't always the case, but if we assume that, it will also take 2 months to beat M2S and 2 months to beat M3S at the very least, and 2 months to beat M4S if it was like exactly the same difficulty, but you have to re-clear every week. And if M1S is still hard after 2 months, then you don't have as much proc time on M2S, and when you finally beat M2S, you don't have as much proc time on M3S, and like, so it goes. So presumably, if you stuck with that team, it will not finish. Is that fine with you? Then you stay, or you can stay, and like, this is a team where I get the impression you're overqualified, where some other people in the team are clearly underqualified, but you're overqualified, and the raid leader is offering you a seat in a group where maybe you're not overqualified anymore. If you take the position of, I want to clear this raid tier, then the first raid team that took 2 months to beat M1S might as well not exist in your decision making, because the first raid team will not finish, so they're not good enough for you. So you can take that into consideration. Like, it's a little selfish to think like that, but that is something you could do. And if we take that out, like if we remove that raid team from the equation, your option is not Savage Raid with a static, or join the slightly more hardcore Savage Raid. That's my advice, Fade. That's the best I can suggest. Of course, learning so that you feel like you're prepared and qualified is not a bad idea. Like, it's always better to learn more. But that is the best I can suggest. What's this I'm hearing about Kunai's pain being personal? Yeah, just to round out on that one. I think, was it 6.3 or 6.2? Was it even 6.1? Where they moved the debuff to Mug and then just made Trick Attack have a separate personal one? Because Ninja represented a problem in balance, because as a result of Trick Attack at that point being the only... Oh, let's see it too. The only 1 minute buff. As a result of that, it meant that jobs, like if you had a ninja in your group, then jobs that had a decent 1 minute burst were objectively superior. And hilariously, the change to how is it we get out of this labyrinth? The change to make sure that all the raid buffs were 2 minutes in Endwalker was exactly, as far as I know, with the express intent of removing that. Like in late Shadowbringers, where there were still some weird buffs, we had reached a point where some groups had started to favor extremely specific raid compositions, because the varying buff durations and cooldown timers meant that if you had this specific configuration, that supplemented each other the best possible. So it wasn't even about which job does the most damage, it was which job does the most damage in this rather specific box. And what do you do about that? Well, you remove that. You just delete that as a problem. By making all of the cooldowns equal. And then Trick was missed. Oh. That's unfortunate, Jake. That sucks. But because of that, they of course changed Trick Attack to be a personal effect for the ninja, and then made Mug the actual raid buff thing, which was on a 2 minute cooldown anyway. Oh yeah, that is also a good point, Ardell. That is a very good point. This one was for Fed, I believe. The fact that you're asking yourself all of that already means you're willing to learn and do as good as possible, and you will, and that is indeed true. You will grow with the responsibility, Fade. Yes, as I joined the stream and he's talking about Red Mage again. Hey, well, people asked something about Red Mage. The flashes make the most sense once you realize you actually have a GCD of 5 seconds, not 2.5. Yeah, exactly, something like that. Tato says, thanks for the tips. My statics DPS consists of a Pictomancer, Dragoon, and Viper, and me on Red Mage. Yeah, so Pictomancer and Viper will 1000% always beat you. Aren't you still in the locks? Yes, I am. I clicked the button too early. Well, that's a classic. How does anyone know how to rewind that? I haven't changed any of the standard keybinds in Live Split. There we go. I found it. I do that sometimes when I talk with an NPC, because sometimes the NPC sends me to the next zone. But yeah, if you're playing Red Mage and such, like, I would imagine that the Dragoon would also consistently beat you, because, you know, melee DPS. But the Pictomancer and the Viper will absolutely, like, if they're playing their rotations well, then a Red Mage can't win. They straight up can't. And yeah, a Dragoon probably will also win. It is just like, it is not as amazingly insane of a lead, because Dragoon itself also has a raid buff. Guy's always at his peaks. Thank you. I'll say Joshua, hope you're doing well. Hopefully the mechanics of the later fights clicks more easily with the other players. See, that is the difficult thing. That is the weird thing. At some point, you would assume that practicing long enough on M1S would teach you so much. Like, you'd learn so much, or at least enough, that you would, like, have learned how to approach learning a fight and things like that. I don't know if I'm taking a different route. I just saw where you were going, Gazel. Oh yeah, that is also true, Yaharis, with Sage. That Sage has Psych. That's a good point. Bruntum says, not gonna lie, that the buffs all becoming 20 seconds really threw me off. Yeah, that is actually a weird one, and that was also something that confused me a lot. Was that that for ages it has been like, well, raid buffs are used at like around 7 seconds into the fight, and then it's a 15-second burst. And if you have a 20-second raid buff, then you might use it a little earlier, maybe a little bit earlier, maybe you'll use it at the same time. The point is that because it's 20 seconds, you can, like, you have a little bit of like wiggle room, and some jobs use that. And now all of them are 20 seconds, which means that if there's a job that really wants to use their raid buff at a different time than everyone else, then it means that you get this like Eye of the Storm kind of effect, where some buffs are used a little early, some a little late, and it gives this like 15 to 18 second burst window, which is really weird. But there's not much you can do about it, because some jobs will use their buff a little earlier because they kind of have to. And then there was Summoner with their 30-second buff, yep. And then there's Reapers, yep. I had a feeling, Harris, because it kind of, what you said kind of matched with when we were talking about Sage. And you're right. If you leave the stream in 2x speed, you can avoid falling behind. And there's also a trick to having minimum delay. Really? I felt... Wow. That's a big crystal. I felt like if you have a stream in 2x speed, maybe I've just not given it a chance to do it, but I felt like usually if you actually caught up to the stream, it would sometimes like jank out a bit if you left it on 2x speed, but maybe it works fine. That is a good tip. You're on that odd minute burst thing. It is pretty funny. Because I'm pretty sure, the more I think about it, either a job has such a thing, like they straight up has, like they just have a 1 minute burst built in of some sort. And then you can like argue about whether you actually want to like spend extra. Like for instance, a warrior can use inner release on the 1 minute. That doesn't mean they have to use infuriate on the 1 minute. Like not unless they have an extra one, which can happen quite naturally. And a Dark Knight doesn't have to like dump their entire MP and blood gauge just because they're like they've reached a 1 minute burst. But then once you remove all of those where they have like a pseudo 1 minute burst and look at those that actually have the freedom to do whatever they want, then we're pretty much down to Red Mage, Viper, Samurai, Reaper? Red Mage, Viper, Samurai, Reaper, and Machinist. And all the other jobs, pretty much. Pictomancer. Yeah, I guess so. I guess so, in a way. Yeah, that's also true. Pictomancer. Actually, Pictomancer is a really good example because Pictomancer, like, I remember when I was making the guide for Pictomancer, I had this strong focus on Mark of the Ages that was like, well, Mark of the Ages and Retribution of the Medine. You want to use one on the odd minute and one on the even minute, and it took me a while to go, wait a minute. Who cares if there is such a thing on the odd minute? Just throw it out there. Like, if you have an extra, like, if you have Mark, then you just throw it out there. Like, if it means you can have Medine on the 2 minute burst, then it doesn't matter when Mark comes out. Just throw it. So yeah, Pictomancer is also a good example. And honestly, when we get to that kind of consideration, it reaches a point where, like, sometimes I think part of the reason why some jobs get put in this position of being suggested an odd minute burst is more so because it's easier to teach a job that has a rather strict rotation by putting it in clear sections. And for Pictomancer, they don't need it, so we don't really talk about it much. Machinist, it's like the closest you get is that if you're doing the strict Machinist rotation, that's all Emia and Stim. Hope you're doing well. If you're doing the strict Machinist rotation, then you're basically using reassemble on Chainsaw, which comes up every minute. And at some point, like I think like 6 or 7 minutes, maybe 8 minutes into the fight, they will, like, you will have an extra reassemble to use on something, and you just do that. Like, you just, then I guess you will just also reassemble a drill or something. And that's it. And it's pretty much just Samurai where it actually poses, like, quote-unquote, a problem because of buff smuggling, I would refer it to. Those that don't know what buff smuggling is, all of those various something ready. Does Machinist's new big button benefit from reassemble? Full Metal Field has reassemble's effect built in and says on the tooltip that it doesn't benefit from reassemble because it already has it. So no, it does not. Excavator would benefit from it, but I mean, you would use it on chainsaw anyway, so, you know, already spent. But yeah, the buff smuggling is essentially a clean example of it is Warriors Primal Ruination Ready had to be nerfed to only last 20 seconds because if it lasted 30, it was possible for Warrior to smuggle a Primal Ruination cast from their odd minute burst to their even minute burst. And you might be sitting there thinking, how and why? How is you use inner release on cooldown, but on the odd minute you don't have any rate buffs, so when you use Primal Ruin and Ruination doesn't actually matter. Or Primal Rend and Ruination doesn't actually matter. So what if you used Primal Rend exactly 30 seconds later after inner release? So like you basically use it as the buff is ending, which would give you 30 seconds to use Primal Ruination, which would bridge this gap so that you could basically start your 2-minute burst exactly on the dot with Primal Ruination inner release. Which is an incredibly insane amount of management to get this, like, this damage gain, but it was significant. So, the countermeasure was, if you make the Primal Ruination ready buff only last 20 seconds, then it doesn't work. Mostly. And that's also true, Thaddeus. Not only does Full Metal Field not benefit from reassemble, it doesn't spend it. So you can, like, it'll just miss, essentially, the effect, and you'll be able to use it for the next GCD. The funny thing is, and I did mention this in my video about weird rotation optimizations a while ago, is Warrior can still use Primal Ruination Smuggling. Because Warrior's burst is, like, at its peak is like 20 seconds. If you actually get everything in it. Which means that if you use a gem draft like 10 seconds before your burst starts, maybe like 11 seconds before, you'll still get everything in the burst. But if you do that, you can use gem draft, Primal Ruination, do like 3 GCDs, inner release, and then, like, do your burst as normal. So that still works. So how does this relate to Samurai and the odd minute burst is... well, actually, let me check. When you use Make Your Shisui, it gives you 30 seconds to use... to spend the Tendo, which you spend by using Midara Setsugeka, where it'll instead be Tendo Setsugeka. When you use Tendo Setsugeka, it gives you 30 seconds of Tsubame Gaiji ready. Which means that, hypothetically, if you could, like, puddle around for a minute not using Midara Setsugeka or Tenkagoken, then you would be able to smuggle a Kaishi Tendo Setsugeka for a full minute. You could do that. The real suggestion here was exactly that. Well, you could just use Make Your Shisui closer to the 2-minute burst so that the Kaishi Tendo Setsugeka actually is what heralded the burst instead of a Kaishi Midara Setsugeka. You could do that. Now, whether that is actually good is a different story. It's probably better. But I wonder how that fits into the rotation. That was an interesting thought. And I wonder how well it would work. And it's a little harder to test, like, just alone, because the whole gain in doing that is entirely dependent on whether your group is coordinating raid buffs. Which means that if you just practiced it on a striking dummy alone, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. Let's see. Let's see, Pokai says, I dislike Monk's 1-minute burst because the rotation feels way more flexible before you get fire, the Riddle of Fire. Yeah, that is true. That is actually really weird that it is like that. That it just gets locked down. Let's see, Bronson says it kind of reminds me of if there's not a bard, then burst doesn't matter in MSQ dungeons. Oh, MSQ roulette. Is that true? Astrologian has divination in MSQ roulettes. So I guess it's bard or astrologian. But yeah, battle voice and divination is pretty much it. And ninja has mug, that's true. Time to break our legs, yep. Whee! Gone are the days of non-standard warrior. Yeah. Hey NPC and Bits and Tristan. Hope you're doing well. Also Strat. Hope you're doing well. This is, man, that code really brings out the sachet in the auto walk. Did I hear a blade? Yes. A samurai blade. We're talking about the concept of whether you need to actually do an odd minute burst as a samurai. Like, couldn't you hold that Meikyo to push more damage in the even minute? With the big asterisk there, of course, being can you do that without drifting Meikyo's cooldown? And that's when we go over to buff smuggling. Can you smuggle? Can you smuggle a Tendo set, a Kaishi Tendo Setsugeka from the odd minute to the even minute? And the answer to that is no. Because, like, the answer to that flatly is no, because if you use Meikyo Shisui on the odd minute, then it's not going to be there on the even minute, because you have to use regular Amidara Setsugeka, right? And then the question is then, can you hold Meikyo long enough that there won't be Amidara Setsugeka to have before your even minute burst? But the more I think on it, the more I think, no, you can't. Because, like, 6 minutes into a fight, after your burst, you will have an extra Meikyo. So at some point, you don't have infinite space to delay that Meikyo in the 1 minute burst. Hey Jeff, hope you're doing well. Is this a new mental roulette challenge that you're doing? This? Like this specifically? By the way, we should be turning northward. That there is not the exit. But this is an interesting thought process, right? This is the new mental roulette challenge. The walking challenge? Reset the run. It's not exactly a related to mental roulette. There's an opportunity to just do something silly while we talk about Final Fantasy XIV. Tristan says, from what I found, Maker's generally better used to perfectly reapply Higanbana than go through the trouble of holding and maybe missing out. Yeah, that makes sense. And that is also probably the thing that we might be missing when we talk about, well, Samurai technically doesn't have a reason to do an odd minute burst, but Higanbana's awkward. So that does track. That is a thing we haven't even talked about in this conversation, is Higanbana. We suggested this so that guy could get it out of his system so we could watch more clips. And see, the funny part about that, Emir, is that then the challenge became, how long of a walk can we make? And then Hey, Caligulov. Hope you're doing well. Yurin says, I find it kind of funny that these came around as an April Fool's. Yes. I mean, it was really funny that so many were so intrigued by the concept of a stream where you're just walking. A lot were surprised that was actually... I remember one particular person went into the stream and said, all right, I'll bite. I don't understand what's the point of this. I was like, yeah, we're walking. That's it. See, in-game, if Dot said, buff smuggling is why I'm glad I play Summoner. We don't get that nonsense. Actually, technically, in a really roundabout sense, you buff smuggle Etherflow from the odd minute. So technically, Summoner is one of the oldest cases of buff smuggling ever. Paladin also tricks you by making you think you're not buff smuggling, but you are. Yeah, exactly. Because Aetherflow is technically a buff, you are smuggling it. Paladin also has done... Paladin has at least done buff smuggling since they got reworked in 6.3. Because they buff smuggle Divine Might and sometimes also Atonement. It's called prepping. Yes, in a way. And yeah, nowadays, with how much Paladin has going for it, I think that like was finished up in like 6.4. Not entirely sure. But Paladin smuggles having Royal Authority ready on their GCD. And they smuggle Atonement combos, and they smuggle Divine Might. Like, they smuggle everything. They should give an achievement for walking 1 million kilometers. That would be pretty funny. And yes, Scholar can also buff smuggle Etherflow, although it has a little bit of a smaller payoff. Ooh boy, 3 extra energy drains, am I right? You can get 9 energy drains with Dissipate. Yeah. Ooh, 900 potency. Wouldn't it be buff smuggling because you smuggle it into buffs, not a buff that you smuggle? Well, Giraheen, all of the things that we smuggle are buffs. Like, they are buffs. So it could be both. It could be both. And it wouldn't change a thing. Like, actually, Etherflow is a buff. And all of those something ready effects are buffs. Buff smuggling? Sure. Ace of Hope, hope you're doing well. I don't know if it always had a name like that, Caligulov, but it became something that people talked about a lot about with Dawntrail. Probably because... probably because jobs have a lot of something ready buffs nowadays. Yeah, a good example is Red Mage can smuggle Prefulgence, and Red Mage would probably do that when they can. And for those that don't get that one, is Manification has a cooldown of 110 seconds, not 2 minutes. And in a long enough fight, or depending on when the fight ends, using Manification on cooldown, even though it means Manification isn't during your, like, the raid buff window, will still make you do more damage. But because Manification has a 110 second cooldown, that of course means that it'll slowly drift away. But when you finish your melee combo, like completing the full Manification, like the 6 spell buffs, gives you Prefulgence to use for 30 seconds, I believe. Which means technically that you have like a 42-ish second window where like that's how far you can drift out of Embolden before it becomes a problem. So that is another thing you can smuggle. Are you sure Etherflow isn't a debuff that seduces scholars into spending everything into energy drain? Sometimes. The Star of the Trek. That's a great title. Yeah, I don't know, Giraheen. It's just it makes sense in both ways. Like, that's all I can say on that. Bit says, please no one make savings stacked drains correct. I refuse to engage in more reasons to argue that I should offload defenses as the healer. Well, the thing is, Bits Fox, that it's not about making it more correct. It's about optimization in this case. And this is something that I always try to bring up in my healer guides, is that while you can do a thing to do more damage, that doesn't always mean that it is the right move for you. And like, that means that while it would be the most possible damage you could do to spend all energy drain, like all energy drain stacks on Etherflow, all the Etherflow stacks on energy drain, that is not always something you can do. And the difficult part is that if raid buffs and burst windows didn't exist, then energy drain would be a very easy button to use, because you just click it if you have extra. Like, you just go, oh, Etherflow is about to be ready. I have an extra, I'll just energy drain. And that would be fine. But because burst windows exist, when you make the decision of, I don't need that energy, like, I don't need that Etherflow there, matters. Like, that actually matters for when, like, for how much value you get out of it. And that's where the problems come, like, originate, is that while you could hold them and use them, like, when you know you don't need them, if you use chain stratagem, then you can go, well, I'll, like, energy drain is up, so I can spend those that I have in the chamber immediately, and then I use Etherflow, and then the challenge comes, because optimally chain stratagem happens during raid buffs, which means it's not just my energy drains have 10% more crit chance. They will also have, like, maybe your co-healers and a Sologian, they'll do 5% more damage. You also have a Dragoon that also gives you 10% more crit chance. And you have a Dancer with technical finish, so they actually do 5% more damage, and those stacked multiplicatively, so it's like closer to 10.5% in combination. And you also have a Ninja. So, like, that's an extra 5%. So, actually, those energy drains, if you use them now, special sale, 115 potency energy drains with 20% extra crit chance. Buy now! Because in 20 seconds, they're back to 100 potency. And that's where the problems arrive. That's the problem. Whereas if there was no such thing as a burst window, then you could use them whenever, so you could just focus on using the Etherflows you don't need. But it is really important, this is also what I keep saying, is you don't spend them just because you have, that may be quote-unquote optimal for damage, but every three energy drains you use is like 1 extra broils worth. So this is something, like, this kind of optimization is something that you should really only worry about if you're, like, passing, like, trying to do the maximum possible amount of damage. It's not going to be the deal breaker in reality. Strat says being able to convert ether flow to damage might not be the best design as the game is right now. Indeed. Hilariously, I think we've talked about this specific problem like a dozen times on streams on this channel. Is that basically energy drain is a dangerous type of design because it means that you can use a resource that is generally considered a defensive resource for offense. That means, with the way players play games these days, that when optimizing, the way you're going to look at ether flow is that it is damage first, defense second. You opt to lose damage. Like, that is the problem. When you're optimizing, you flip the script and don't go, oh, I did more damage than usual. You did closer to the maximum. Like, basically, you're trying to reach the peak. You're trying to reach the ceiling. You're not seeing how far you are relative to the average. And that means that something like energy drain is a very dangerous thing. Hilariously, Dark Knight, and I also usually talk about this when we get on these conversations, before they got reworked in Shadowbringers, Dark Knights had the capacity to spend their MP on entirely defensive things. Like, right now, you can use MP, which is an inherently offensive resource, on TBN, but if TBN is used correctly, it refunds itself, so you can invest in getting a free refund. You just get free damage reduction when you use it right. But before Shadowbringers, you could use Dark Arts to double the effect of Dark Mind, so it took even less magic damage. But why would you do that? You could do damage with that MP. That would be stupid. And that's basically that problem, right? That's the same problem. The same problem. And Dark Knights got reworked. Scholars actually lost energy drain with the release of Shadowbringers, as I recall. Which is also the reason why in Shadowbringers, Summoners lost ether flow, and energy drain was the one that was made into generating ether flow. And Scholars lost energy drain. And then it took like a few weeks, I think. And then energy drain was added back for Scholars. Because what do you do with excess ether flow? And then in Endwalker, you got the answer. Nothing. You do nothing if you have extras. You just don't do anything. That is the answer. And exactly, Gazel, Scholars complained because they didn't give a replacement. But there is no good replacement. That is what we always end on in these discussions, is what could you give Scholars instead of energy drain? What could you give them? A heal? They have the ether flow because they didn't need to heal anyone. MP? Do they need MP? Make it generate a shield. That could be, if the shield is really long, then maybe. But for the most part, the point was that the ether flow wasn't needed defensively. Like, that's the intent behind energy drain, is if you didn't need it, then you can use it on this. And if you didn't need it, then, like, there's not really anything you could have. Like, what could you give? MP would be the least, like, I guess the least unhelpful thing. Double negative. It would be better than nothing. But that's how bad it is. And exactly, Strat, that was kind of what I was getting at, is that then the next expansion they added Sage. Sage doesn't have a good, like, don't have anything to spend extra Adderskull on. So they just don't do anything. A shield with 1 minute duration, potency scaling with your remaining ether flow. That is an idea, Ham. The problem there is that it might just, like, have this snowball effect. And if the shield is actually good, then Scholars might just opt to use that instead of, you know, actually spending their ether flow. Humans don't make mistakes. We're all absolutely perfect. How dare you suggest such a thing? Yeah, exactly, FFXIV. Exactly. What do you mean? Just play perfectly, Lamau. It is pretty funny. I think I mentioned this in a previous stream, but that is actually something that was pretty interesting. Strat might remember this conversation more than others did, but we had this conversation on the Discord server some time ago about the idea that, I mean, it isn't a bad thing for healers to go determination when they're proccing. Direct hit is hardly, like, is a minuscule damage gain over determination, but determination increases healing. This kind of philosophy that actually stemmed more from Strat was part of what motivated me to try to find a situation where tenacity is good. Because it's kind of the same deal as, you know, healers get determination for prog. Tanks could get tenacity for prog. And sometimes it might actually be helpful, as the problem was rather specific. And the funny thing there, and the way this is related to what FFXIV said about perfectionism, is that if you actually go and check the comments on the "Is Tenacity Still Terrible" video, there are a lot of comments that just flatly say yes, or basically say in long story short, say, how could you even suggest that doing less damage would be better? Because if you do more damage, then you kill the boss faster, and if you kill the boss faster, you'll take less damage. When the entire point of tenacity, in its best case, is that it actually allows you to live to the point where you can do the damage, and things like that. It is quite funny, because often those players that were so aggressive about it also indicated that from their point of view, there's only maximum damage and no other answer. Which also usually came accompanied with, and if you need anything else, it's because you suck. And therefore shouldn't be savage raiding. Caligula says, I thought tenacity just doesn't scale as well as, say, determination. That is correct. As I said, I made a whole video on it, Caligula, and the long story short is that tenacity is like 20% behind determination now. So basically, if you had the exact same amount of tenacity and determination, tenacity, like if you had 5% determination and took those exact stats and put over in tenacity, you would do 4% more damage and healing instead of 5%. But tenacity's damage reduction is insanely strong now. Like, actually, it is realistically reachable to reduce damage taken by 20% with tenacity. Just for the sake of comparison, in Endwalker, the best number I could produce, by like pushing it to the limit, going, you have full bis and somehow there's tenacity on all of it, was like 12%. You can have, again, there might not actually be the gear pieces with tenacity on it, but if you could get like a maximum tenacity build at this point in the expansion, the first raid tier, if you could go full tenacity, you would be able to reach over 20% damage reduction. Is that helpful? For most? No. But for some, it might. We have someone who was messing around with making a crit tenacity build for tanking in Mentor Roulette. And they said that it was actually really good. Because the thing is, you still got maximum crit when you get synced down. Because, like, you know how syncing works, you just get, like, maximum both stats. So if they find good crit tenacity pieces, they will have both a lot of crit and a lot of tenacity, which is great. And then they were a lot sturdier when sometimes they had a bad healer or their damage, like their damage dealers were a little lacking. They basically had, as I alluded to in the video, basically you have permanent rampart. That's pretty helpful if your group is kinda eh. Just kill the mobs faster, yeah, but that's not only on me. But yeah, as Strat said, turns out Tenacity is quite effective at what it does. The problem is that rarely do you need it. That's the problem, is rarely do you emphasis on need it. And that has the effect that some players will go, hence it is garbage, and you should never as much as touch it. Put Tenacity on my ranged gear so that I take less damage. That is an interesting thing. I think we talked about that. Was it on stream? Recently was, what if Tenacity worked for all jobs? Would there be a benefit to damage dealers taking some Tenacity? Would that actually help? Would that be useful for anyone? I was like, hey Perrin and Angel, hope you're doing well. See, Perrin says, to be fair, the game generally does give you everything you need to survive with group coordination at minimum item level. So requiring full Tenacity to survive something is more or less a skill or coordination issue. And that is true. That is true. But that is exactly it, is that there's a difference between saying, if you need Tenacity, then there's something wrong, because that is true. Like, that is true. If you need Tenacity to survive a mechanic, there's something not happening, right? Or there's something weird. Like, is it an unusual group composition? Like, what's wrong here? But then going, and because there's something wrong, if you need Tenacity to do a thing, then you can't do the thing. That's where it becomes problematic. Someone goes, well, you shouldn't get Tenacity ever, and if you do, then you're not Savage Raid material. Maybe not. But this current raid tier, you should be able to do it with Tenacity. Someone said that the DPS checks were pretty lenient. And that is correct, Perrin. I see you just came in, because I actually started this conversation with saying Tenacity is 20% weaker than Determination at increasing damage output. But if you saw my recent video on Tenacity, you'll also see that Tenacity's damage reduction is absolutely ludicrous in Dawntrail. Like, they buffed Tenacity's damage and healing bonus. They said that. What they didn't say is that they buffed Tenacity a bit, and then they buffed Tenacity's damage reduction a lot. Like, it's crazy strong. The problem is still, you need it. Back in the Stormblood Ultimate, non-tanks used to melt Vitality in their accessories. This was common on procs to get more survivability. And Vitality does actually nothing for damage output. That's true. So maybe it would do something. Now, I just realized that the reason why you all repeated the power scaling of Tenacity to Determination is because Bronto masked. It certainly doesn't help. I just want to mention, it certainly doesn't help that the stats and stat optimization in Final Fantasy XIV has for so long been basically Lamau melt crit determination direct hit. And that's the end of the day. To the point where, like, that pigeon crow meme, the pigeon goes, hey, maybe like we could do something else with the stats, and then the crow just goes, Lamau's stats are meaningless, just stack crit. Like, we've reached that point where it is actually a little difficult to talk about the stats without people just going, it doesn't matter. Why take the airship when you can walk to the east, then, and take the ship to Limsa? What? What? What do you mean, Hieronymus? Oh, West Thanalan. Basically, the reason why we do it this way is because as there are places that cannot be reached without using airships and boats. Airships and boats are allowed universally. And this is a shorter path than walking all the way to West Thanalan. So like that's just the rule we made. Where's the walk finishing? Well, you'll have to watch along and see, Angel. There's only so many things. It's like, you know, the further we go, the more likely you can guess where we're going, because we're not exactly circling back around. Hey, Silvermint. Hope you're doing well. It's the bar, isn't it? The Strat says people need to just get into the mindset of prog is different from farm. Yes. That is actually a really pretty straight on point to all of that. Is that that's what it's really about. The walk has a very small chance of finishing in Limsa if the servers go down right now. I mean... You're not wrong. At this point, some among you can probably guess where the walk is ending. But I think, and this is actually an interesting point, and this is something we've talked about before, is that the kind of player who would be the most manic, I'd almost say, about optimization. You have to do the optimal opener. You have to do the perfect rotation. You have to have the optimal stats and all of those things. The more I've looked at it, the more it seems like the players that are the most manic, about this are more likely to not be Savage Raiders themselves. That doesn't mean that if you're like that, you can't be a Savage Raider, but it does make sense that players that mainly basically look at optimization from the outside looking in at where it matters, it can be hard for them to reasonably understand how important it actually is. Parents says you need the bell curve meme. Yeah, for those that don't know, that one is like or don't know it by name, it's the one where it's like the idiot on the left side and the genius on the other side, just saying something super simple, and then like at the top of the curve is someone panicking like, no, you have to do it optimally, you have to do it perfectly. This is the only way. Yeah, that sounds about right. Like with the I just press buttons on the high and low end, and people complaining about not using the optimal whatever in the middle. And yes, that sounds about right. There's also like the percentage of players that just say that because it's funny. Hey, Alex Case, I'm from Denmark. The secret sauce to optimizing is crit RNG. Yep. Indeed. But that is also something that I can say, speaking like personally, is that in Endwalker, I made a lot of like optimization guides and videos. Alright, Emir, enjoy your evening. A lot of like videos on optimization and how you... where's Gazel going? On how these things work, how the numbers work. And I will say, like, I don't feel like the way that I present the things have changed too much, but doing savage raiding myself, like actively being like doing it instead of just understanding how it works and all that, has helped me to value the oh, there's a path there, huh? Value the some of the more utility-based things a lot better. Play a technically flawless run, and then the rank 1 is some jabroni with a scuffed rotation who crit all the important skills. It is possible. That is very, very real. Very real. And yeah, indeed, Strat. That is also like the kind of stuff where like how like you might see me savage raid, and you see how many tomahawks I throw out there in the name of let's not risk it. And I mean, I still pass blue, decently high blue, when I don't die. That's good enough for me. Although the closer I get to full best in slot, the less likely I might be satisfied with that. Who knows? It's very easy to just go, it doesn't matter. If your gear is weak enough that it's like, well, I mean, it's probably a gear issue. You won't get much purple since you're lacking weapon, probably. Well, I don't have the best weapon, but look what I found. Look what I found found Tuesday. Yeah, big unga bunga damage, exactly. The best part is you can dye it. So, I dyed it. It's so shiny. Parents says I dyed mine with the blood of my enemies. Strand says DPS is only a problem if you can do a fight mechanically flawless, but still die to enrage technically. But more DPS grants you margin for error. Indeed. And that's the funny thing, is that with the current raid tier, I think part of the motivation for pumping damage extra hard on some of the fights is what you're skipping. Like, for instance, with M1S, where, what was it? I feel like I heard that a lot of the week 1 clears didn't learn Raining Cats. Like, they just pumped hard enough to skip it. Exactly, skip Raining Cats or disband. I think, like, the last 2 clears we've had of M1S, we managed to kill the boss fast enough that Raining Cats didn't start. Like, the cast didn't activate. But we've had to do... Oh, hey, Angel. Had to do Raining Cats enough times that... We could probably do it. Like, we could probably do it. Probably, possibly. But, and when I say that, it's mainly because despite all the times we've attempted it, usually it gets kind of scuffed. Like, something goes a little bit wrong. Either leading up to Raining Cats or during Raining Cats. Bounty says, I do not know what Raining Cats is. Precisely. Which also made it even funnier when we had this, like, what was it? People said, oh yeah, the raid tier is kind of easy. And then the people who said the raid tier was kind of easy skipped the hardest mechanic on M1S. Like, really? And yeah, exactly, Caligula. I'm assuming what you mean is the maximum damage thing, Caligula. Because that's the thing. I've talked about this before. It's not a Final Fantasy XIV thing. If we, quote-unquote, went back to Heavensward days, or quote-unquote went back to Stormblood days, it's a matter of how people look at games nowadays. That people have gotten really good at optimization, which means that what is optimal is known extremely quickly, and a lot of people will just do that. Which means, for example... Oh wow, Coco. Thank you for celebrating 18 months with the Call of the Pink. Thank you so much. I hope you're doing well, Coco. But something like Dark Souls... Yes, you could stack HP. The main reason why sometimes it is reasonable in a Souls-like to stack HP instead of damage is because when you stack 1 point of HP, you get like 10% more HP the first few times. But if you get more damage, you get like 1% more damage. So it's like, you need several points. I'm pretty sure we're not going right yet. You need several points in the damage stat before it even means you have to swing at the boss one less time. For that reason, stacking HP a bit is often beneficial, but even still, you still have the counterpoint, like the counterbalance of, yeah, but you could also just not get hit. 5 head. Kylan says, do you guys plan on doing the 24-man Savage as a stream event? Probably not. Partly because I'm reasonably confident that that will be really hard, like relative difficulty speaking. But also because I have yet to be able to present 24 players for anything on stream on this channel. So even if we had 24 players, we would probably have 24 players with some among them that are just not ready for that kind of challenge, and that might not be super fun for them. And would by extension not be super fun for everyone else. So we probably won't. I'm not sure. but I don't think I will. We're waffling on whether we think it will require Biss or not. You see, that also is a point that would matter. Category of men trying to skip mechanics. People do it, of course. And that's always circles back to the more damage is better. Well, that's hard to say, Strat. We were told that the intended difficulty was extreme, and the boss designer said it's kinda more savage. Like, it's leaning more savage. That's what we were told. So, difficulty-wise, it's probably between extreme and savage. So, by that point, it's probably not going to require best in slot. Probably not. Oh gosh, is probably part of the reason why no one knows a strat for the second to last mechanic in M1S. Exactly. Exactly. Would you call that savagely extreme or extremely savage? I would call it chaotic. Also in Souls, your HP could become irrelevant if you get hit by Scarlet Rot or Death Blight. Also that. And speaking, like, actually, this is a really big sidestep and really weird that I would mention this in 2 streams back to back, right? Crystal Project is this indie game that is kind of like an old school Final Fantasy game, but with like a lot of more modern takes. Like, it has enmity, you know, threat. It has threat. So you can have a tank. There's this, I'm pretty sure it's an optional boss, like relatively early in the story. One of the main things it does is an attack that deals exactly half of its target's HP through defense. It also puts like a bleed debuff on you and makes you unable to regen health and reduces healing received. Like, it just really, really is painful, so you need to like Ishuna that, essentially. But because it does that, like, it alternates between that move and a physical attack. So like, you need your tank to tank it, but your tank probably has a lot of HP, right? But every other attack does more damage if you have a lot of HP. What do you do? And that is actually somewhat of a legitimate question, because every time I've beaten that boss, it has kind of been scuffed. Like, somehow managed to beat it while resting my tank 2 or 3 times. Jerk to the healer. Sometimes all you need is 2 HP. Yeah, the problem is that it does 50% of your maximum HP. But otherwise, you'd be right. Yes. Shirk to the healer. There's actually, in that game, there isn't there isn't a true taunt in the game. There is a taunt, but it just does like a ludicrous amount of threat. Which is sometimes necessary because unlike Final Fantasy XIV, who's really nice to their healers, this game makes it so that healing the enemy's current target generates a lot of threat. So it's very common that if a boss is like really hammering your tank, the moment your group falls apart is when the healer heals that 1 point too much and takes aggro. I did it again. And how do I do that? How did I do it? How did I do it before? Undo split. There we go. The legendary healer double shirk. Focus the healer is always the correct. Yeah, I mean, the moment the boss goes, wait a minute. What if I just kill the healer? The enemies in that game did the guild heads with the chanters so they know to target the healers first. Yep. Bondi says the meta builds in Elden Ring are actually ranked about around how much of a boss they can skip. There you go. And I'm pretty sure in Elden Ring, like just like most Souls-likes, the stat that gives you more HP is very stacked. Like it gives you a lot of survivability compared to the damage stat. But you know, if you keep taking the stat that gives you 1% more damage, eventually you reach a point where you do enough damage that you can skip the hard part. Also, hey Shaq, hope you're doing well. This is when you convert to a whole lifesteal build. You know what? That is actually interesting, because in my first playthrough of Crystal Project, by the way, it is an indie game. It is on Steam. It's awesome, and it has extremely good mod support. It is just not super well known, so it doesn't have very much in like good mods. It has a Final Fantasy mod that I'm playing through at the moment, which is a little ironic. But my first playthrough, I reached a point in the story where I unlocked, I can't remember if it was called Dark Knight or Reaper or something like that, but it's a tank that uses a scythe. And wouldn't you know it, it uses HP as a resource. It uses... See, advertisers, guys, ready for sponsors. It uses its HP as a resource, and most of its damage increases its health bar temporarily. So it heals itself, makes a really big health bar, and then just takes attacks with its health bar. But it can heal. The incredibly ironic twist was that normally tanks in this game generate like initial aggro by taunting everything, like an AoE taunt, for example. And then they kind of just maintain it by taunting every so often. This Reaper kind of job does not have a taunt. So it holds aggro literally by just doing the most damage. You could, like, you have a subclass, you could just take a taunt from a different tank class. But maybe you don't want that, because like then you choose that other class just for the taunt. That kind of sucks. So you're gonna have something actually cool, which means that you have the situation where your tank can tank really well, but like if he needs any outside support from the healer, then he might not be able to hold it. Cat Damon says Crystal Project is 25% off on Steam. There you go. This is your chance, everyone. Maybe you want to take a subclass for extra damage. Exactly. Hey Alex, hope you're doing well. Exactly. Maybe you'd want to take a subclass for extra damage. Or maybe you'd want to take an extra subclass for extra defense. And you can't choose both. See, in ESO, there are some dots put on the tank that scale off the tank's max HP. More health is not always better in that game. Healers can't keep up with the dot. That is an interesting thing. I don't know too much about ESO myself, having not played it, but I would assume that there is the option to like build defense instead of HP. And I guess such a debuff would exactly counteract just stacking HP, which is not a bad idea. Right, everyone, get your bingo cards out, cross off WoW on it. In Wrath of the Lich King, healers had so much mana, and tanks had enough survivability that the way you geared tanks was every time you had a gem slot, you just put stamina in it. Avoidance? Damage reduction? Who cares? Just eat it with your health bar. If the game had more dots that scaled with your HP, then tanks wouldn't do that. It's basically a hard counter to a very simple solution. Hey Bimo, hope you're doing well. But yeah, that is to say, Crystal Project has a surprisingly large amount of customization options in it. But there are definitely fights where it feels like you're getting shoehorned into something rather specific. And there's also the part that speedrunning the game is like just stack 4 black mages. It didn't help that Icecrown Citadel had an area debuff that reduced dodge by a ton, like 20% flat, to really not make it worth stacking. You see, the funny thing there, Strat, is as far as I recall, the story there is that is actually druids. It was like that 20% dodge reduction wasn't to hurt the warriors or the paladins or the death knights. It was a druid problem. Turns out that if you have a tank whose primary stat gives them dodge and damage and crit, that tank will have a lot of dodge, just naturally. Like, I'm pretty sure druids had like 60% dodge chance, maybe less than that. They had a ludicrous dodge chance. Bears, by the way, tank druids are bears, for those that don't know. There's just matrix dodging bears. So how do you fix that? Because druids also happen to have an extremely large HP bar. Like, their thing was take it on the chin. Because they can't block and they can't parry, but they can dodge really well. So they had a huge HP bar. And they dodge really well. How do you nerf that? Well, in this final raid, you have less dodge chance. The warriors that didn't have that much dodge, the paladins that didn't have that much dodge, the death knights that didn't have that much dodge, just went, I guess I'll stack, like, I could stack parry, I guess. I won't, I'll just stack stamina, but I could if I wanted to. Angel says, I heard Black Mage, I'm listening. Let me paint you a picture. Crystal Project is basically a Final Fantasy game, but not officially. Because it's an indie game. When you start the game, you have 4 characters. You choose what job they start as. Your choices are warrior, monk, rogue, warlock, aka distinctly different red mage. I believe it's cleric, aka distinctly different white mage, and wizard, aka distinctly different black mage. The wizard gets flare. The red mage gets, like, well, the warlock gets dual cast. Like, it's pretty clear. They're legally distinct red mage, exactly. There are, of course, various classes in the game that are unique to the game, but you can very much see sometimes. I'm pretty sure it's actually called Flare. But like, there are some things where you're like, oh, this is basically this. Real life bears only build strength for some reason. And yeah, exactly, Strat. Bears in Wrath of the Lich King were very good. You need to play that other game as well. What's its name? Rabbits and Steel? That's also a good game. Rabbit and Steel. Singular rabbit. It's only one. It's one rabbit. It is a good game. See, the thing is, just to add a little bit more, a common problem I find with more old school Final Fantasy games is that because the stat line, like, if you have the option to change your class, like, if the specific Final Fantasy game gives you the option to change class on your characters, that does change the fact that your level up stats is often partly, if not entirely, dictated by what you leveled up as. Meaning that if you leveled up one of your characters as a black mage for a really long time, and then you go, actually, it would be really good if they were something else, then I really hope that you're choosing something that is offensive magic, because it's not going to be good at anything else. In Crystal Project, when you reach the first like major city, there will be an NPC in the city that, for a price, allows you to just move around your level ups. So you can just go, you can just change it so that you didn't actually level up all those levels as Black Mage. You can just change it so that it has a different stat line. This also means that you can heavily customize your stat lines. You can go like, well, I actually want more speed, so let me take a few levels off of this and put into this. Yeah, like a full respec. And not only that, you can fully customize it, because there's, as I said, no one saying that you can't like mix it in a really obscure way. Like, you can just go, well, I need this many levels in this specific job to get this stat that I need. Which also led to, like, when you're optimizing, there's like, you know, there are super bosses. Then there are like specific amount, like there's soft caps, you know, there's a certain amount of speed that is more helpful. And there's a certain amount of HP you would need to like survive most attacks. Like, you would go, well, you need this much HP, you need this much speed to optimize. You could of course have a little bit more, a little bit less, and then you like stack your damage stat. Like, you can do that, but you can also just do what you feel. Like, for the most part, you can do that. And the game also has a huge assist option. You can change the level cap. You can just add more maximum levels. If you feel like the game is too hard, you can allow yourself to level up more. You can increase the amount of XP you get from fights. You can increase the amount of gold you get from fights. And you can also just turn it off again. Crystal Project's getting like 30 sales right now. And 2 levels in fighter for action surge. It's something like that. It's an amazingly good game if you like Final Fantasy, but you don't like old school Final Fantasy games, but you're not a big fan of some of the awkwardness of those games. It's great. Have you heard of the critically acclaimed RPG Crystal Project? With a 25% reduction on Steam, you can use legally distinct flair and play up to the first major city that lets you change your stat line. My biggest issue with those games is random encounters. They get old so fast. Well, then I have great news for you as well. All encounters are indicated with like a flame that, like, as you get close enough to them, they will dash at you, but you can dodge them. Like, you can just sidestep them. So you can... Skill allows you to dodge random encounters. You can just walk past them. Also, really low level enemies tend to leave you alone. Like, they're not idiots. So like that's also solved. Like Persona Earthbound? I don't know. I've not played those games. But it's like an act, like it's like a flame on the ground. And depending on what kind of enemy it is, it might charge at you in different ways. But it will charge at you. Sometimes they'll run away from you. It depends. Hey Riku, hope you're doing well. Yeah, also Rapid and Steel, that's also a great game. That one also has legally distinct Black Mage with totally not ley lines. Hi, what job do you want to be on my run? Can I be a Warlock? Warlock or Thief. Or, I can't remember if it's Rogue or Thief. One of them. They're both incredibly helpful, by the way. Earthbound had the best system overworld enemies. If you were high enough level, it wouldn't even go to battle screen, just auto kill and give you the XP for the enemy. Huh. I guess that is a solution. That is also a solution that would work. Also, we still have a long walk to go. I have a feeling that this is actually going to be the longest walk we've had. You mean legally distinct red mage? Yes. Indeed. Indeed. Yeah. Exactly, they are really red and with a feather, and if you check their equipment, they start with a rapier. Yeah, decently good start setup. Like just to keep in mind, whatever starting classes you choose in the game, you're stuck with those for like 5 minutes. Like, you can just change it. But a pretty good starting setup is like warrior, warlock, white, well, cleric, and wizard. But the wizard is optional. You could also have a rogue. The problem is that both warlock and rogue are insanely good. With rogue having some of the most OP stuff if you know how to use it. A cleric, 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 cleric. Ah, perfect. 5 minutes? That's like half a savage fight. Oh man, I don't have time for that. I don't even know if it would be 5 minutes. The thing is that usually someone would explore the starting area, look around, and it might take more than 5 minutes. The point is that you will not be stuck with your choice for very long. And because you can change your stats later, once you reach that point, you can change your mind on basically anything. You can like the character that allows you to like change your levels. If you like, the thing is you have to like subtract levels. Like you cannot buy levels at that NPC, but if you subtract levels and then just don't put the points in something else, you can also just de-level. So if you're like, I feel like I've over-leveled the game, I want to challenge again, you can just downscale yourself again. Like it's amazingly flexible. Red Mage is essentially the generalist class. They're kind of okay at everything. Yep. The reason why Warlock is so good in Crystal Project is because there are passives you can toggle. But Warlock has a spell that applies Regen and a spell that applies Refresh, and Refresh recovers MP. And you can get passives that apply both effects to you at the start of combat, which makes it extremely good for farming. Because you can just set it so any character you have that uses MP starts the fight with like passive MP recovery. But that means that all of the characters you want this passive on would need to level as Warlock a bit. Is it mandatory? Nope. But you can do that. And then, of course, that Red Mage has a Shuna. And dual cast. So it's better at removing debuffs than an actual White Mage would be. Says a lot. But yeah, just a little extra note. I know, like, I'm just going on this huge tirade of this other game in Crystal Project, but just to give an insight to how much information you have in a fight, at any point while it's your turn, you can inspect anyone on the battlefield. If your opponent is actively targeting a specific enemy, or player, I should say, player character, the game will say so. It'll put arrows pointing, I'm going to attack that guy. And you can see the threat meter on the enemies. You can see who, like, you can see it coming a mile away if your healer's going to over aggro. You can see it. Sometimes you'll just see it and go, well, I need to heal the tank or they'll die, but I'll over aggro if I heal them, so I guess my healer will die. And then you just have to be ready with a rest. Like, whatever happens, you have to be ready with a rest. Like, the good side is if the healer dies, their threat resets, so I guess there is a benefit here. And you can also inspect all of the actions an enemy has, so you can see what they could possibly do. So, like, that removes this huge portion of, like, getting cheated by the enemy doing something you didn't know they could. It doesn't tell you when they will do that, but it'll tell you that they can do that. And there's also a little bit like, you know, like Slay the Spire, there's, like, you know, intent indicators. And you can also see the turn order, and if you go to the turn order, usually it'll actually show you what the enemy is going to do, like what the intent they had means. So you can prepare for them to do that specific thing, that you can read exactly what it does. Are there any aggro reducing abilities? Some. Usually, at least in the base game, so not with mods or anything, usually the optimal move is to be careful with your aggro in the first place. There are passives that reduce the amount of threat you generate. But are you going to the Ultra area? Yes. But the game, as probably doesn't surprise you, Caligulov, recognizes that, that threat management is incredibly valuable. Which means, if I remember correctly, just off the top of my head, like, Rogue has an attack, like a spammable attack, that doesn't generate threat. So, like, they can stay at the bottom by just not doing any threat while dealing damage. Which makes sense for Rogue. Assassin, which is like a late game job, has an attack that resets their threat. I can't remember if it resets the assassin's threat or if it resets all threat. But the problem there is that the assassin can only use this move if they're wearing a bow. And all of the other attacks that the assassin has, and the rogue has, by the way, that are really good, like insanely strong options, require a knife. So, by making it so that the awesome threat reset button requires a bow, they're making you choose. The notable thing that I remember, a specific combo you can set up, is that with a... I think it's a shaman. They can increase the duration of debuffs on your target by 50%. And assassin can set up a buff on themselves that makes it so that their debuffs last an extra turn. With those two effects combined, you can make a debuff that normally lasts 1 turn, lasts 3 turns, and Rogue can apply Blind to an enemy for 1 turn, and Blind in Crystal Project means that they will miss. Like, it's not a chance, it is they will miss. But if you do this combo of having a shaman set up the debuff increasing effect, and the assassin sets up their debuff extending effect, and then you blind, then the boss is blind for 3 turns, which is almost enough that the assassin can build up resources to do it again. But that requires a knife. And you can't use the blinding move if you're not at the bottom of the threat meter, which means that the shaman has to, like, get it in gear and do some damage to stay ahead of the assassin, and if you have a healer separately, they need to as well, and the tank also needs to like work it to stay ahead of the assassin so that the assassin can repeatedly do this combo. But you only get this combo if you're not using a bow, which means that you don't have the threat management to do this for free because you're missing the bow. So like, there's a lot of thought going into that, but it probably makes sense that in a game where threat is actually relevant, threat management would be very, very costly. I love the Weeping Angel-esque lag. Yeah, it's a little strange. And hey, Gleaming, hope you're doing well. Alex says, an NPC just told me, you don't love a child more, you just love them differently. I think they're talking about as a parent. Some of the NPCs and some of the some of those starting NPCs in the first area, Alex, are, I believe they're supposed to be grandmothers. So they say some weird stuff. Where did the walk start? It started in the party room in Marida Ventorum. I thought their name was Nan. Ah. We started here. Like 20 NPCs called Nan. Makes more sense they're grandmothers. Yeah, exactly, Alex. Hamza, you're too distracting. I forgot to season my food. Oh, no. Unseasoned food. Well, we probably have to... I'm guessing some people might not have unlocked the speedway. So we'll take the long walk, I guess. Now, can I remember where the long walk starts? For those that don't know what I mean by the speedway, is that if you have done the... If you've at least started the allied society in this zone, then you can basically take this to here, and then here to here. And then you're already almost all the way up. But if you haven't started it, then you can't do it. I feel like as we're getting further and further out in outer space, we're also getting further and further away from having a good connection. Are you seeing this? You lagging tonight? Or is it OBS again? Are you talking about people lagging in-game, Shaq? The characters stuttering in game is not OBS. This is my connection to OCE being crisp. This is the reason why I rarely do content on OCE. And as far as I can see, according to OBS, there's been no problems tonight. Just keep walking, just trust it'll work. Dynamis in your Ethernet cables. You're also gleaming. Essentially, this is a long walk. I am still on the search of the longest walk, given the rules that we have, and I'm actually pretty sure this might be it. I'm not sure if it's better to start in Churning Mist, but it seems like Ultima Thule, all the way to the edge, or Mare Lamentorum are really good options. For like for one of the edges. And it is really hard to determine because Churning Mists is a zone in and of itself that takes like 50 minutes to traverse from the top to the bottom. So it takes I think it takes longer than the fringes and the peaks combined, just as an example. So when looking at paths like this, it's hard to say whether a specific pathing is longer or shorter by just counting zones. And yeah, this zone was an experience. I think a really interesting thing that I think some players might have missed out on, depending on how they play the MSQ, is that as you progress through this zone, the music gradually builds. Have you thought that Solution 9 to Best Ways could be longer? Yeah, that's an interesting question. I would say that out of all the Dawntrail zones, it's probably from here all the way out to there's a little zone in the middle, and then you come out over here, all the way around here, all the way up there, and then through here, and now you're in Sharlayan. Like, this is like an alternative path from going to Ultima Thule. I think that is longer than from Solution 9 to Heritage Found to Shaloni to Liolal. I haven't tested that, but that would be something that could be done. Is I think didn't we do that as the first walk in Dawntrail was from Living Memory to Solution 9? Solution 9 to a Far East zone? Yeah, that one is really weird because the Far East zones And this is something that you eventually learn as we do more of these walks, is that the Far East is basically like wherever you're going, if you're going from the east to elsewhere or to the east, where it congregates is Kugane to Limsa. So if you're going to the east, you saw how long we had to walk before we got to Limsa. That's where we go to Kugane instead, and then we would go to the Ruby Sea. There's a boat that basically takes you halfway across the zone, and you might say, well, that's cheating. No, it isn't. Like, we used a boat to get to Kugane, so boats are legal. And then you would go to Yangsha, and then maybe to Boja, or to Gangos or something. And that is like that means that zone is surprise, like, or that area of the game is surprisingly small in a way. In contrast, Churning Mists is insane. Let me see if I can figure that out. Like, you have to start up here, yeah? And then you basically have to go this way around, as I recall. Around here is a spot where you can basically jump down and then go this way around. But if you actually went, like, if you came into this zone aiming to get up here, you actually have to walk all the way around through here, up there, up this way, which makes the zone ludicrously long. A little bit like Ultima Thule, where we start down here and then we have to basically go in like almost like a circle. You guy telling a fun fact while the names of the channel members scroll past. Yeah. Do I have a fun fact? Do I have one? Fun fact. Did you know that before Endwalker, the stat on gatherers that makes it so that you have a chance to get an additional loot actually determined whether you got a high quality item instead? Which of course implies that you had an extra, that gathered materials could be high quality. Something you may also have noticed on crafted items is that if you have high quality of all the materials that can be high quality on an item, then usually it starts at like 50%, like 50% of the maximum quality, I believe. But the keyword is if all items that can be high quality are high quality, which means that if the item is consisting of some things that can be crafted to be high quality and some things that can only be gathered at normal quality, then you just have to have the things that can be high quality to reach it. Whereas before this thing, you needed to have actually everything be high quality, unless it was something that could not realistically be gotten high quality. Azizla would suck. The Azizla is really weird. I believe there are teleporters throughout the zone, but I can't actually remember whether they are actually active once you have done the MSQ. Could enemy drops be high quality? I don't know, but I think so. Maybe? Right then. 2 hours and 9 minutes, by the way. My guess, I'm not entirely sure what is longer. Girian says, I believe some of us went to test this a while back. That sounds about right. I couldn't remember what the result was. But I wonder if... Because, like, the thing is, and this is basically what I alluded to before, is that most of these walks culminate in us passing Limsa Lominsa. Weirdly, Limsa Lominsa is like the centerpiece of most of these walks, simply because it happens to connect everything for some reason. Which means that if we looked at this from Limsa Lominsa, is it longer to go from Limsa Lominsa to Ultima Thule here, or to Mare Lamentorum, all the way up in the party house? Limsa connecting everything makes sense because it's a port town. Yep. It's also pretty funny that you can walk from Thanalan to Gridania and vice versa. But you can, as far as I remember, you cannot walk to any part of Lanusia. Yep, it's cut off. Only by boat. Yep. Which had this funny effect when I had planned a walk late Endwalker, of walking between the starting cities, only to find that I could only walk to 2 of them. Bum, 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 bum. Almost as if it is an island. Yeah, I know. Weird. What are those? Right. Clip time. Clip clop time. Let's see, what do we have? I have clips from Cyanide from last time. And then we have a clip from Philippe. A clip from Strat. A clip from Gazel. A clip from Emir. A clip from Ham. And I also have a clip from Annie and a clip from El Pickler. So if you're on the chat, let me know that you're there. Now, the same amount of zones between Limsa and Outer Lanusia and Limsa and the literal end of the universe. That is an excellent way to describe it, Hieronymus. And that is actually also an incredibly good way to demonstrate that the amount of zones hardly dictates how far something is. Because when I originally made the first walk, and I'm pretty sure I started with Gangos to Mare Lamentorum, because that was the I'm pretty sure that was the maximum amount of zones I could come up with rather quickly. It wasn't the longest path. Well, let's start with Philippe, who has a clip from Dunscaith. Dun 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 Dunscaith. Oh man. I think I know what's going to happen here. Is the ice coming down? Yep. Oh no! Oh no! No! Well then, wait. How did someone survive that? Am I disconnected? Wow. I look away from the game for 40 seconds. I'm guessing the game will also... Oh, never mind. The Danish internet. There we go. What if you did a longest walk, but you must also do each dungeon in the zone as you pass it? That would be weird. And really long. And very difficult to determine. I think it's such a silly detail that this can happen. And particularly thank you, Coco. Particularly, I feel like there would be other fights where the boss could end up dead in the middle of a knockback, and it could kill you like that. But I feel like it doesn't happen. And thank you, Coco. Thank you so much. We had too much damage. You know, the saddest part there, Philippe, is that you had exactly the wrong amount of damage. That's what actually happened, is you had exactly the incorrect amount of damage. Which is, really funny. It's like how if, you do Labyrinth of the Ancients, if you have exactly the wrong amount of damage, you will wipe to Ancient Flare anyway. Even if you have amazing damage. Because if you have exactly the wrong amount of damage, the boss will start casting Ancient Flare at the exact moment he can. And then I don't think you can make it. Like, you actually need him to waste some time. Otherwise, you can't make it. Imagine that. You could have the wrong amount of damage. Speaking of wrong amount of damage... how do I put this? You know how we can easily skip some phases in older extremes? Is that something that can happen in... Like, how long has it been since that was possible in a Savage boss? And when I mean skip a mechanic, I don't mean as in, well, the boss is dead, so you skipped it. I mean as in, if you did enough damage on M1S, would she skip the first Mauser? Just skip it? Is that possible? Could they do that? Or does she just follow the script? So an incident Skaten asking people if they remember their knockback death bit. Like Hawk Manor Hard. Yeah, that one is also really funny. That is actually the exact reverse of this problem. Because she will, if she's busy doing something, she will not summon the ad that you need to kill. And if you hurt her too much before she summons the ad, she will summon the ad, eat the ad, and you die. Right, next we have a clip of some Uwu stuff from Strat. I'm not sure what the context for this is. Wait. Are they supposed to be ads? They're supposed to do something, right? They explode. What? I see it now. That's like 80,000 damage. What? Wow. If you ever needed some evidence, this game sometimes is being held together by rubber band tape and prayers. It's emotional damage. Well, look no further. I didn't even know that was possible. That it could actually show the damage and then go, never mind. Small indie company, what did you expect? If I remember correctly, Strat sent this. I think they sent this clip in relation to talking about the fact that if you use an attack like Warrior's Decimate, which has an extremely long lead up, and then it lands and it goes damage, 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 damage. If you use Decimate and then Onslaught, like actually any OGSD will do. You use Decimate and something, it will, like, you will do like the jump from Decimate and then you will do the dash or whatever you do, and it'll show all of the damage numbers immediately. But the damage numbers being shown do not mean that the damage actually landed yet. And the most relevant context in which this can matter is Nascent Flash. Yeah, hey Terry. Indeed, just because the damage number appeared doesn't mean that the attack landed. Particularly if you use an OGCD to skip, quote-unquote skip the animation, the attack lands when the time it should have taken to land actually has passed. This is particularly relevant for Nascent Flash and maybe one or two other actions in the game, because Nascent Flash is kinda weird. For those curious, Nascent Flash heals you. Like, basically, it takes note of you having done an attack and successfully delivered it. It notes that you will deliver it successfully when you click the attack button. It notes that you have done it. And it will heal you, even if Nascent Flash ends before the attack lands. It will happen, it will heal you. Nascent Glint, on the other hand, which is the buff you give to the other player, heals and takes note of the heal when Nascent Flash heals. And Nascent Flash, while it notes that you will be healed when you use the weapon skill, the healing itself happens when the weapon skill connects, which can be over a second later. Which means that if you use something like Fell Cleave or Heavy Swing that hits really fast as the 4th GCD in Nascent Flash, there's a reasonably high chance that your Nascent Glint target will also receive it if you properly late-weave Nascent Flash. But if you use basically anything else, maybe Inner Chaos will work, but basically anything else has a too long animation. Storm's Path, Storm's Eye, Decimate, Chaotic Cyclone, Primal Rend, Primal Ruination, most of it has too much animation. The theory crafters call this a damage point. Thank you. Which will result in the effect that you will heal on the 4th hit, but your Nascent Glint target will not. Weird. The way that I typically look at it is that knowing this fact means that I usually look at Nascent Flash as 4 heals for me and 3 heals for my friend. That's still good. Like, that's still good. It's still like 1,200 healing potency that you can guarantee will crit if you want to. Like, if you use Nascent Flash, Primal Rend, Primal Ruination, Inner Chaos, all 3 hits will crit. Nascent Flash and Bloodwinning is just really weird. It's just that they're so good that most players don't really care to learn any more than that. Now, speaking of tanks, Gazel has a clip of leveling roulette with all tanks. Actually, all tanks. Are there any particular highlights in this, Gazel? I would have assumed. I think it's quite funny that all 4 tanks have tank stands on. This is a mosh pit comp. I think it's quite funny that all 4 tanks have tank stands on, and the Dark Knight ends up tanking. Like, after all that. Gleaming says, I saw someone party findering for leveling roulette with 1 tank and 3 DPS. Yep, that is a common composition. I'm almost certain the tank would have been a warrior. But that is a thing. Tank stances were part of the requirement on the party finder. Ha! Okay, fair enough. I mean, I didn't say that there was a problem with that. It is pretty funny that the Dark Knight ends up with the aggro, though. And I do remember this was actually a real minor problem when we did back in Endwalker. We did oops all. I think we did oops all gunbreakers or something weird like that in dead ends. And it was an actual problem that whatever gunbreaker ended up with having done the most damage and getting aggro. Like, if only one of them had their tank stance on, what would happen is that specific gunbreaker would, 1, run out of cooldowns, and 2, run out of healing, and that meant that the other tanks either had to, like, take over in some way or another, like, take some part of the burden, or they had to just funnel defensive cooldowns on the main tank. And just having everyone just randomly take turns is probably more effective. Although, if you look at this, it probably makes the best sense in a group with 4 tanks to have the Paladin, I would say, main tank. Because they can block, and then just have the 4 other tanks help the Paladin. And then if the Paladin actually drops low, then Warrior has tools like Equilibrium. Like, the key being that Gunbreaker and Dark Knight has really good shareable cooldowns. They also have, like, big cooldowns, so, like, anyone could take over for a bit. But, like, if you're going down the list, Paladin has block just passively. And Paladin and Warrior then can do a lot of healing, just generally speaking. Interesting that Warrior's the one with aggro on the boss and Dark Knight dead last. That is weird. Maybe they used Provoke. Do one of the current extreme trials with 8 tanks. It's actually hilarious. I could imagine. Warrior main tank and 3 Dark Knights passing TBNs between Bloodwetting. That would be hard. And the saddest part about Warrior main tank and 3 Dark Knights passing CPNs between Bloodweddings is if you went and did that in like a Dawntrail dungeon, I mean, there's a realistic chance the Warrior doesn't need the TPNs. Like, I'm pretty sure, aside from like some specific brutal pulls in some of the leveling dungeons, I had enough defensives to cycle through when I was soloing it on Warrior that, like, I could stay in melee range for, like, a good 30 or 40 seconds. And was mostly fine. Like, okay, with 4 tanks, you're doing a lot less damage. But it's probably fine. Probably. Aha! Oh no! No! The supplication! Out of Grundon to the power of 4. And the weirdest part, if you do any content with multiple of the same kind of tank, is that it requires a huge amount of coordination to get it right. Like, if you have 4 gunbreakers, I'm pretty sure Aurora doesn't stack. Not 100% sure, it probably does stack, come to think of it. But Heart of Corundum does not. That's not where you want to be. So you have to, like, really cycle it. Like, if you're a warrior with 3 Dark Knights, then each Dark Knight would have to know exactly when their turn to TBN is, so that they don't override each other. Which is, by the way, a hilarious meme thing you can do if you're 2 Dark Knights. You're the off-tank Dark Knight. You use TBN on the main tank when the main tank uses TBN. The main tank is like, where's my Dark Arts going? Why am I not getting anything? The shield is breaking. And then it's just the other Dark Knight just overriding every time. Alright, Ham. We probably will check it. Thank you. Hope you have a nice evening. I didn't know that I had to hurry to get your clip with you on it. Sorry. In 8 tank parties, it's funny to see what the optimal composition of tanks are. I would guess Gunbreaker's region stacks? Oh, okay. I would guess that it would probably be very effective to have a warrior main tank, because bloodwetting. A paladin would probably actually serve really well as off-tank. Simply because, like, every time anything requires 2 tanks, if you have any control over it anyway, the paladin can make sure to, like, do Holy Sheltron and intervention. Which means that the rest just have to, like, pick up the support. So it means, like, how much extra healing do you need, and what kind, like, in what shape do you need that healing to be? And then, once you have enough healing, you just have to stack as many of the tank that does the most damage as possible. But exactly, they offer slightly different perks, which makes it a little strange. If you needed a lot of healing, do you need more warriors, paladins, or gunbreakers? I would say it depends on what kind of shape you need that healing in. Right? Yeah, also that, Cat. It is quite funny to see the English in JP. All caps. And what is it the duty finder is called in JP? Is it called the content finder? Any 8 tank content I can think of. I don't know why you wouldn't just bring 8 Dark Knights and just blitz the thing. See, the thing is, Bronto, that Dark Knight does about the same amount of damage as the other tanks. It's just that Dark Knight and Gunbreaker has a slightly stronger capacity, wow, to, oh, hallowed ground, to burst. Which means that if you bring 8 tanks, you don't have any raid buffs anyway. So Dark Knight being able to, like, stockpile their burst doesn't do anything. Like, Dark Knight scale better with raid buffs But there's no raid buffs if you are if you're playing 8 tanks. Hello ground for melee uptime. Did you actually need to step out of melee range though? Main tank, off 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 tank, and of course, let's not forget off tank. That's probably a Dark Knight. That's that in 8-man content runtime? What if it's synced? Funny, the Dark Knight is actually usually the 1 MT in 8 tank comps because TBN is so good. I see where you're going with that, Strat, but the reason why I wouldn't put Dark Knight as the main tank is exactly because TBN is so good. It doesn't have to be the Dark Knight. The tanks. The Dark Knight could just put TBN on someone else. That is exactly the reason why I wouldn't put Dark Knight in the main tank slot. Because whoever is main tank can just have TBN. Like exactly the reason why I would probably consider Warrior or Paladin higher is simply because Warrior has, like, I would probably say maybe Paladin would be the better choice as the main tank, exactly because they have Holy Sheltron and passive blocking. And the thing is, just like Dark Knight can just pass their TBN to the main tank, a Warrior could just nascent flash the main tank. And it'd be fine. But I guess if it, like, I'm imagining that most of those things where you have, like, 8 tank comps is, like, not trying to optimize it, they're just trying to have fun. And, see, the thing is, the moment that you take that angle, it makes a lot more sense that you would have something that isn't optimal. And Dark Knights, as far as I know, often find it rather inconvenient to TBN someone else. So if they could just TBN themselves, that would be nice. That would be nice. Right, so Ham has done some funny thing. We could do that next. Ham did a funny and found a lot of skill speed. Like a lot of skill speed. And is going into the Dying Gasp with I believe a GCD of 1.67. Maybe they'll show it once I get inside. Let me just, so we don't have double music. Maybe if I do this. I can hear if I get disconnected at least. Yeah, exactly. That's also what I meant with what kind of shape do you want your healing in, because both Gunbreaker and Warrior can heal someone else with a... like, Paladin can also do it with Intervention, but also Warrior and Gunbreaker can. It's like, it's exactly 3 different shapes of healing, and then Dark Knight has the big shield. There was a sprout. You might be looking at this and wondering why why they're not double weaving, but I can see here that they can't really. Not really. So the context here. This isn't even ping diff. This is 1.67 GCD. This is super fast, Monk. 1.67, yes. And the reason why it's this specific encounter, Ham told me that the reasoning was you need... Basically, it has to be like a Shadowbringer's duty, but it has to be one where you don't get synced down too hard. So it has to be like reasonably high Shadowbringer's gear, but it has to also be like so that you can have full skill speed on all of your gear. I believe it's mostly Dawntrail gear with skill speed, and then just sync down. And yeah, it doesn't matter how fast your latency is, you will not be able to double weave with this much skill speed. Diamond weapon would be even crazier then? Let me take a moment. Dying Gasp has no item level limit. So basically it syncs you to... 530? Yeah, 530. Cloud Deck would also do that. Diamond Weapon would probably also do that, but it has to be this section. Because this actually syncs you. That is the trick. And I'm pretty sure the reason why it had to be Shadowbringers is because Endwalker, you'd like if you have Dawntrail gear with a lot of skill speed, it doesn't quite peak hard enough. Or something. Like you might not be able to find or like across the board strong enough Dawntrail gear that has primarily skill speed. And if it doesn't have primarily skill speed, then it has to be so good that it still peaks secondarily skill speed. It was also pretty funny because based on based on the complaints that I heard from Ham, this is probably not the first take. Ham did mention that they had problems with lunatics in their duties. Like, something would go wrong in some way or another. Which I think is really funny. Because I don't feel like I have now played the video at 2x speed for even faster GCD. The artificial 0.835 GCD. I think it's 535 actually due to the Savage weapon. I can actually answer that in a really weird roundabout way. I discovered the answer to that in a randomly when I was making a video for the Mythbuster series, and I was demonstrating how syncing works, and then randomly ran into it. Basically, if you have an actual 535 weapon, then it will not get synced down. But anything above 530, or rather above 535, gets synced down to 530. You can test this with if you have a 535 weapon, like an actual one, either that or the relic, like I don't care. And you have a weapon that is above 535, you'll notice that your stats drop significantly lower when you use the above 535 weapon. What you're doing to this video is what Garlemald did when they installed the echo in people's heads. Speeding it up? Time to mash! what was the GCD of 6-sided star with this build? It would have been 3 seconds, I'm pretty sure. No, wait, 3.33 seconds. This is the Heavensward Monk experience. And yes, it is, Yannick. This is the model that they used for Talmarai. Or rather, the rig, I believe. This is the Heavensward Monk, except TP doesn't go to 0. That is really funny. You can reach that much skill speed. But yeah, basically, the way I ran into that discovery, Strat, is that in that video, I zoned into Pakistan, which does not, like, doesn't have a listed ice mill requirement, which means that it has whatever the maximum for level 80 is, which is 530. And I had my like 6 something weapon. I believe I had both my Endwalker relic and my Shadowbringer's relic, and basically the stat lines were the same. So they both would cap out on crit. So presumably, if they were synced to the same 535, then it wouldn't matter which one you were wearing. But when I put on the 665 Endwalker relic, my crit chance, like my crit rating, dropped slightly, as opposed to when I was using the Shadowbringers one. So when content, like at the end of an expansion, doesn't have a listed item level requirement, basically they have an item level requirement, but if you're wearing legitimate gear that you could be wearing in that content, then as far as I know, it doesn't actually touch it. I.e., if you're wearing level 8, if you found item level 700 gear that was legitimately for level 80, then it wouldn't sink it down. But given that it isn't, it sinks it down. Which is a really weird thing when it really comes to it. It's really strange. Really strange. Right, so let me just check again. Cyanide, Emir, Annie, El Pickler. Any of those names among you all? I think I saw Cyanide momentarily earlier, but but it doesn't help if they had to go since. I think 167 would mean that 6-sided star would have been 334. Pretend I am Emir. No. 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 It is really funny, Yannick, when they have rigs that are rather specific, it gets really obvious when they're using it. Which also is what, like, I think it's really funny in M1S that, like, she's in this, like, super, like, agile outfit even, and most of her mechanics are rather agile, right? She does big attacks, but her auto attack is just doing this. This. She just puts out her hand and just extends her nails at you. And that looks so ridiculous that it makes you realize that that's because the rig that she's using is for a creature that normally just does this and then shoots like lightning at you or something. Just blip, blip, blip. So they kind of had to like work with that, or they would have to like add additional animations or use a different rig. Power. Nails. Think. But that really stood out to me. We also have a Brute Bomber, also known as Pepsi Man. I'm sure everyone realized that that's basically Pepsi Man. Come to think of it, I don't even know if Brutal Impact is a unique animation. Doesn't Living Liquid actually do like that slam down animation? What's up, BBM? I think Wicked Thunder is a new rig. And I think... Oh, the chat! Don't worry, Amy, I was waiting for the real one. I'm not sure about Honeybee. Is she a new rig? Or is she a copy of someone else? I don't know. I'm sure if someone can highlight what she's... Like what rig she's using, it's probably obvious. She looks unique to me. But it is really funny that Brute Bomber has that specific Pepsi Man kind of rig. Well, good thing you're back, Emia, because I was just asking if you were here. So that we could check your clip from the second trial in Dawntrail, for those that don't want to see that. Pepsi Man, more like banned compound man. Banned compound detected. He's just drinking a Pepsi. Brute Bomber have the Pepsi Man cheeks, though? Probably? The Pepsi Man cheeks. Isn't it the same as the second to last boss in Don't Skate? Honeybee? I don't think that's the one. Banned compound detected. We have a Coca-Cola sponsorship in the Arcadian. She even has a spear. That's true, but does she have the right pose? I'm pretty sure that Scattered in Dunscaith has like a slight angle on her pose. I'm not sure. Oh, we get justice for RefBot in the next tier. That would be funny. Right. Are you still here, Amy? We can check your clip. See your notes, as I want to know if I should have mitigated more than I did. You turn off the BGM. Alternatively, Revbot gets increasingly larger, Injustice is over the tier. Yeah. They just keep memeing on him. Phase 1 is very boring. I don't know, Phase 1 is quite interesting. At a specific point, it gets interesting. The swords suck? Oh, that's the interesting part. As I've said before, I'm shocked that they didn't do anything with those spinning blades in the extreme version. Also, like, why are they completely gone once we get to Phase 2? What? Nicely dodged. Skinniest Dark Knight in existence right here. Yeah, with those dodges, just yeah, the first phase doesn't really have anything going on for it if you don't have any issues with the spiraling blades. Which is exactly the reason why it's like, why didn't they do anything more with that? They could have easily had that, and we got this. And oh, you wiped. Oh. Hey, nom nom nom. Hope you're doing well. Indeed. Well, the trick there, Amy, is that once you know how to do those kinds of edits, it gets a lot faster. Ignore this. Okay, I don't think you can change the voice in the middle of play, can you? You could use Ablation for that, just because you had to. Like, personally, just... Like, this is a normal, so something. You don't need it, but here, given that you have the OGCD real estate, I would probably put Oblation on your co-tank. Mainly because they have a Vuln stack. And also because you have two. Aside from that, that was fine. Oh yeah, indeed you can. I think the reason why I assumed that is because, if I remember correctly, as I don't actually change the voice acting in games very much, but I have played through Stranger of Paradise in Japanese as well. And in that game, I'm pretty sure you have to restart the entire game, like close it and open it again to change the voiceover. So I just sort of assumed, whoa, the Viper surviving. Is that another bingo square? Yeah, I guess it is, Baron. Wait, asking, does that count? You mean because I mentioned Stranger Paradise? Is that another bingo square? I would love to see if someone just shared like a bingo card with all the things that I mentioned in an average stream. Oh, that. Boy, that raid wide, by the way, hits incredibly hard for a normal. Oh, so yeah, that is true. Emiya does do clicking, but that's fine. The have you been doing some PvP? But that's also something we sometimes talk about in regards to controls. Is as long as it's not limiting you, then who cares, right? It didn't break. Go back. What didn't break? I think you missed the snapshot. It didn't take damage. At this moment, it's too late. At this frame, your barrier had to already be on the target, I'm pretty sure. Snapshotting and all that. But yeah, as long as as whatever control scheme you use doesn't impede your ability to do something, then whatever. White Mage clicks the Sacred Soil probably means Asylum. I sometimes do that with Shake It Off. Oh no, I have to use Shake It Off. Boom. Everyone gets a barrier. 0 damage to the Shake It Off. And then I'm just hoping something else will come and hurt them so that it isn't wasted. You know, some damage that the fight will do. I don't hope that they'll actually get hurt. Shaker List gives the over time heal. That's true, and depending on when it's used, they also might get some immediate healing. So it's like it's not completely wasted. Snyder Gates says, for control schemes, I've used a combination of keyboard, mouse, and controller during top, so it could always be worse. I feel like I remember someone mentioning that there's this really, really insane control scheme where someone like used a controller and a keyboard, or a controller and a mouse. Magic damage how? What? Oh yeah. That is weird. You should have used Dark Missionary there then. In retrospect. Looking forward to the I play Final Fantasy 14 on 20 bananas with the video. There's this guy that makes random weapons. Like random things and objects, and then sets them up so he can play Final Fantasy 14 with it. But often it's so unwieldy that it's more like, see, I can, not it works. An ability that heals plus regen and also a shield, but it's a tank action? Yeah, I know. I know, right? No, you can't have my Medica Well, I guess it's Medica 2, more like. With an attached sucker on it. That's mine. You can't have it. And also it's an OGCD. I guess in a way it's more like Celestial Intersection. No, Celestial Opposition. Combined with like Hollis without the damage reduction. Super Louis 64 for the curious. Right. Indeed. How did I die? I clicked all my defensive cooldowns, even Shake It Off. Record scratch. Oh. Paladin collecting... Whoa. A good thing the Paladin isn't the main tank. Right, neutral sect Helios. No, neutral sect aspect of Helios, yeah. But as an OGCD. Very balanced. It is quite funny. Shake It Off doing that is like... Is it ever something you want? Is it genuinely asking, is it ever something you want? That, like, you like throw big cooldowns on the pile to make the barrier slightly bigger. Is that ever something you'd actually want? It's also in Bloodwedding sometimes. Yep, rarely I do that as well. Often by accident. Sometimes I'll use Thrill of Battle exactly for that reason as well. Overall, Emir, overall, I think the main thing you could have done different was, I guess you could have helped your co-tank a little bit more. But other than that, I think it went fine in terms of mitigation. I rate this song 10 out of 10. And yeah, Oblation being used more would be a good idea. God, get Oblated on. Yeah, that is true. If you don't need Bloodwedding, then you could shake it. I guess the reason why I rarely do it is because, well, I'm usually the main tank, which means that usually if I use Bloodwedding and then a thing comes up and I'm like, oh right, I had to use Shake It Off here, I'm more in the situation of I kind of wanted that healing myself, but okay. That's the macro, get Oblated on. If I remember correctly... Yeah. There's also a little weird quirk. Is that if you're in a position as the warrior where you want to use Bloodwedding for whatever reason, but you have to use Shake It Off, if you have someone else that could benefit from Nascent Flash, you can circumvent this. Like, if you only need the healing, then you can circumvent this by putting Nascent Flash on someone else, because Shake It Off does not eat Nascent Flash. Is it really needed if the co-tank only takes damage during the double tank buster? It's not the principle of the matter, Cat. Is like, that's the same thing. Like, for example, on M3S, I use Nascent Flash on Ham. When we're taking the Knuckle Sandwich together, I will usually use Nascent Flash on Ham. And Ham will use Holy Sheltron and then use Intervention on me. And often they will also, like, I don't know if they will keep doing that, but they will usually use Passage of Arms to help me a bit as well. Mainly because they haven't found anywhere else where they want to use Passage of Arms, but yes. Like, we basically hand each other help because we can. And the main reason why I need more help is because Paladin can basically use Holy Sheltron on themselves and their code tank, whereas when Warrior uses Nascent Flash, they basically only themselves get the healing. But their code tank gets all the good stuff. They get all the goodness of Bloodwetting. But the Warrior only gets the healing, which means that if your Warrior code tank puts Nascent Flash on you and you're a tank, and you're both getting hit, then the most logical solution is that you then give your defensive cooldown to the Warrior, because they gave yours to you. And net, it is better for the Warrior to give theirs to you, because Nascent Flash does everything Bloodwetting does, except it heals 2 players. The weakness of Nascent Flash is that it gives the tank part of the cooldown to the other person, so the Warrior doesn't get that. Like, if Nascent Flash gave the barrier and the damage reduction to the Warrior, then you would never have any reason to use Bloodwetting, because then Nascent Flash would be a direct upgrade of Bloodwetting. It would just heal 2 players instead of 1. But for all the other tanks, their defensive cooldown doesn't become better by them using it on someone else. Warrior's one specifically becomes better by them choosing to help someone else. So that has the effect. Like, if I'm tanking something with a code tank, I'm like, if we're sharing a tank buster, I will likely try and use Nascent Flash on you, like if you're my code tank, but I will stop doing it if you're greeting and not sharing yours with me. Because I need yours. I gave you mine. So you have to return the favor, otherwise I'm getting smacked. I'm getting schmacked. I think Warrior and Dark Knight can almost invuln every single buster in M3S anyway. Something like that. Part of the reason why Ham and I just do it properly is because it doesn't do that much damage. Like, it doesn't do that much damage. I'm going to use Damnation anyway. So we didn't even consider it. I showed you my flash. Please respond. Yeah, exactly. please, give me some help. I help you. Exactly, Strat. Damnation for damage optimization. You might have also seen me when we've been fighting M3S. When I use Omgang and invuln the the penultimate tank buster, I use Damnation and another cooldown, take like 1 or 2 punches flat, and then I use Holmgang. The reason for that is that it takes so long before something else happens that me using Bloodwetting on that doesn't matter, and me using Bloodwetting and Damnation on that means that I can delay Holmgang a little bit, which means that there's a few seconds of Holmgang after the tank buster ends, which makes it a little easier. Gives the healers a little more time to react if I don't have anything myself. But it's also because Damnation does damage, so it doesn't matter that I'm using Damnation on that. It's damage gains. And for those that don't know Warrior well enough, it's because, for some reason, Vengeance and Damnation counterattacks when you're hit. Which means if you ever have a random warrior tank in your dungeons, you know the kind, the ones that only use Bloodwetting or Raw Intuition. Like, they don't use any other defensive cooldowns. For some reason, they only use Bloodwetting. If you can't convince them to use Rampart, because I don't need it, except you're like spamming heals like crazy because they're basically sandbagging outside of Raw Intuition, which can happen, by the way. Just convince them to use Vengeance because it's a damage gain. I mean, it's called Vengeance, so I'd assume it had some Vengeance component to it. Yeah. It is also really funny to remember that, fun fact, back in the day, I think A Realm Reborn, Vengeance didn't reduce damage taken. There should only be one altar that's scary after the tank buster, so if you use your invuln in the last 5 to 10% of the cast, you'll be fine. Oh yeah, definitely, Perrin. The reason why I do it like that is because it takes so long before something else happens that me using Bloodwetting there doesn't really matter. I will use Thrill of Battle and Equilibrium to recover after the fact most of the time. And with Damnation and Bloodwetting, you can legitimately take 2 of the punches. Like, you can just take them. And yet, Warrior didn't even have an invuln in 2.0. It's actually quite wild that they went, yep, for tanks in the game we have Paladin who can block, have defensive cooldowns, and then we have Warrior, I guess. What does Warrior do? I don't know. They have more HP. What? What are you saying, Coco? Yeah, in a fight. Then yeah, probably. Warrior was the only tank that could survive Ancient Flare in Labyrinth of the Ancients because it only did 9,999 damage and Warrior with Defiance had over 10k. That is really funny. Oh yeah. We don't need to make attacks do over 9,999 damage, do we? Like, that's pretty Final Fantasy that all of the attacks cap out at 9,999 damage. Surely no one will peak that. Meanwhile, Warriors... I'm gonna ruin this man's whole career. And then just takes Ancient Flare. Just, ooh. It's really, really funny. Which also makes it quite funny that I'm pretty sure the Harden Rage on Ramuh Extreme from A Realm Reborn is like 30k damage. I'm pretty sure it's like 30k. It's like how Warriors can survive in rages now by having over 1 million HP. Yeah. Future-proof your game. Make sure it just kills instead of setting a damage number. Otherwise, you'll just find players that'll find a way around it. And for those going 1 million HP, if you have the Epic Echo from doing old enough content unsynced, you'll have like 300% more HP. So you're already at 800k. Or 1 million. You could also eat buff food. Wait, what are you doing? Ah. Rabanastre. Yeah, that first boss is so weird. A particular mechanic on that boss. Was it the poison stuff? Where, like, the frog ads come in? It's the one with the ice skaters, yeah. And then later in the fight, she suddenly, like, produced, like, toxic fumes or something, weirdly. I'm pretty sure that the air bubbles that the frogs produce get spent faster if people just stay in them. I'm pretty sure, but I've never really tested it. The reason why I think so is because I remember, like, a distant memory that people specifically said so. That it's a problem if people just park in the air bubbles, because then they disappear too quickly. And you have to, like, hop in and out. Otherwise, it might be a problem. But as I said, I never tested it. So it's very possible that it's just people going, it probably works like this. And then just, like, you perpetuate that rumor. Does anyone know if that's how it works? Absolutely no one respects the mechanics of the first boss. Actually, I have to say, Philippe, I feel like the first boss is so... Like, not even just the first boss, but the first boss specifically is so chaotic that... Like, the only way that I'm respecting the mechanics is that I see ads, I attack ads. The bubbles pop if someone with a line AoE stays standing in them. Oh. But I guess that's a huge step up from completely ignoring them. The ads. If you get targeted with the lines, you gotta hop out. I'm sure people do that. I don't respect mechanics that are too weak to force me to respect them. Well, I guess the story here is that that people ignore the mechanics and then surprise Pikachu face. Oh, it did something if you ignore it. Which is always hilarious when the punishment comes like a minute later. And you discover that you ignoring the mechanic means that you done goofed. But that one's rare. Gives you the physical 1 minute debuff that trips on 59 seconds in. Alex says the one I never understood is Sujirana's final boss magnetism. You never understood how? I'm pretty sure that, like, you're basically supposed to go to the opposite so that you get magnetized down to the floor. I'm pretty sure that that's what you always have to do. Is there any mechanic you can ignore in a Bond? Well, depends, and that actually circles back to what Vulpes just said. Always fun when the second boss wipes because everyone ignores the sandballs, and suddenly the second time people know how to do the mechanics. The final boss in Obon Monastery. In the final phase, she has that mechanic where some players have to intercept flyers coming down. Let me just put it this way. There's a reason why intercepting that gives you a damage buff. You might be sitting there saying, what? It gives a damage buff? Yes, it gives a damage buff. Because if it didn't, then some players would basically just stand in the middle knowing exactly what to do and go, someone else will figure it out. I don't want to lose DPS doing that. But because it gives a damage buff, the players that know that would go over to grab the free damage buff. Like, genuinely, intercepting one of those flyers hits you, yes. But if you survive, you get a damage buff for a while. I don't remember how big it is, but it gives you a buff. It's also the same reason why on Cloud of Darkness, which apparently is very relevant recently, intercepting all of the AoEs, like the AoE circles, during the phase where she sucks in clouds, if you take damage from intercepting one of those circles, your team specifically gets boost in limit break. Like, you get some limit break gauge. Which is the reason why you sometimes see that 2 teams have LB3, but the third one doesn't. Because they didn't help. That's why so many people fight over blocking the mechanic. I haven't actually had issues with people fighting over it, but yeah, it's not really a big problem to find people to intercept them anymore. Is that why people stack into the towers? I don't actually know if that is the reason why people stack into the towers. There's a reasonable chance that people do it because if you ignore the towers, you will actually wipe on Cloud of Darkness, and no one wants that. But it's very real. There's a very real possibility that some players do it exactly because of that. Point and laugh at the third group that didn't help. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But then again, I mean, if you just have enough people intercepting the towers, apparently if you have a pumper group, you can kill Cloud of Darkness before she does the next mechanic that follows. And I don't even know if you need LB3 for that. I prefer wiping on Cloud of Darkness due to 2 red mage limit breaks into the beams in the face. I mean, any fight where you wipe because red mage LB is a hoot. Which reminds me, I think it was like a year ago? I think it was last year. Oh no, it was before April this year. Like months before at least, but I remember people suggesting that I should make a guide on how to be as obnoxious as possible in a raid group. Which of course, like the feature thing was Red Mage LB3. And the reason why I didn't do that was it might actually been last year, because I think I did the coffee biscuit video instead of that. Because, well, first of all, to record that, you have to be obnoxious for at least 7 other people. Which I didn't think was really that cool to do. As you've seen when I've done, like, back in late Endwalker, I did the twist streams, where I would, like, do weird challenges, but I didn't do anything particularly obnoxious if it was in an alliance raid or otherwise not full pre-made, because that would be not very fair to the rest of the group. You could do it with a pre-made. I think that is also the reason why it must have been the year before, because the April 1st, the year when I released the coffee biscuit video, which was last year, I don't think I would have been able to, like, get together 8 players very easily. So it was a case of that would be funny, but I can't get that many players, so... Alliance chat macros. That's a good one. I mean, you could still make... I could still make such a video and then just not actually, like, do any of the most obnoxious things in a real group. So that it doesn't annoy anyone. Although, that's a weird one. When I released that video, Why Are You Leaving?, where I basically gave the exact instructions on how leaving works in Final Fantasy XIV, in detail, some people said that they were very curious if this would increase the probability of people leaving groups, now that everyone, possibly, knew exactly how it worked. Because some players in Final Fantasy XIV don't know how it works. Some players think that leaving at all gives you the 30-minute penalty, regardless of any other circumstances. Some players believe that the penalty is reinstated when the group is filled back up to full. And then some players know exactly how it works. But then have a video explain exactly how it works, and then anyone who was in doubt before, if they see that video, then, well, they know now. And the explanation for why people were curious about that was specifically that a video came out about World of Warcraft where someone demonstrated what happens if a lot of people mass report a player. Basically demonstrated that if you mass report a player, they will actually get punished automatically within seconds. And after that, players got better at abusing the report system in World of Warcraft because someone basically explained how to abuse it. So if I made a video explaining exactly how to be as obnoxious as possible, maybe I would be accused for being at fault for making people more obnoxious in the game. Lives as provoke macro, which is several lines long, and then have it go to alliance chat. Just have like macros on all of your actions. And have most of them be like a few line statements with sound effects. And yeah, I agree, Strat. If the system works because people don't know how it works, then it's basically it's like a card house. Or if people figure it out, then it breaks anyway. So we might as well just pull off the band-aid quickly and get it over with. And now now people know, and now we can see if it's a problem. Macro for Tenchi Chin with sound effects. Strat says, TBH, I will play some devil's advocate and say that an auto mute, if you get a massive amount of reports, might be a good thing in 99.9% of the cases. It just doesn't take into account public figures. Yeah. And it also doesn't take into account that how much is a massive amount of reports? Like, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, Strat, but how many would be a massive amount of reports to you? Seven? Like 50 probably. And that's actually the funny thing, Strat. The particular example that I keep circling back to of World of Warcraft where people abuse the report system is the opening of Ahn'Qiraj on WoW Classic. That means you have several 40-man raid teams, and sometimes multiple of them were like together. Like, this guild had a primary and secondary raid team, so they were actually 80 players there somehow. And teams would... I can't actually remember what the rewards were. Actually, I don't know if there were any. But they were like basically raid boss mobs in the open world that people had to engage. And raid teams would report the main tanks from the other teams to make them poof out of existence. And make those raid teams wipe as a result. And then they could take over that mob. And if you're a 40-man raid team, 50 reports is very doable. This is of course specific to that situation, but that's what that's the reason why sometimes, even if you make the auto trigger rather high, someone with a big enough following could abuse this. This is also the reason why it's really important, and this is not even related to reporting anyone. This is related to streaming. If you're streaming in an MMO, then it's your problem to make sure that, your potential entourage doesn't, attack someone because they got the wrong idea. I have had cases where someone in the stream chat basically insults a person in my party, which might be some stranger sometimes. We had a specific case when we were proccing M1S with some party finder people, and someone said something to the effect of, oh, if you didn't have that player in your group, you'd have already beaten it. And first, I didn't even respond. The second time they brought it up, I defended the party finder person. Didn't even matter whether the party finder person was the problem. Doesn't matter. That's not okay. And I will not have that happen. Was it cold? No, it was not cold. I believe it was someone I hadn't seen in my chat before. Alright, Wilbus, enjoy your evening or day. But that is really important that the person at the wheel, basically the one, you could say, leading the charge, makes sure that people don't, like that the potential chat doesn't go crazy. Because if you have a streamer with just 100 people watching, if they're all hanging out on OCE, for example, which would be possible, like we could be 60 people just hanging out here. Like if everyone was on and came to here, we could be 60 people here. We could be 60 people, see a stranger, and then just all go, oh, wouldn't it be funny? And then report. And then we would be the massive 50 plus players that Strat suggested. Sarah says, I hope it wasn't me, because I remember lamenting Party Finder that day and being frustrated with it. I hope it wasn't you that the person was insulting? No. It doesn't even matter who it was. You can make fun of me, though. See, the thing is, the important thing is... Like, I've said this before, is that I sometimes refer to myself... Oh, no, me doing the insulting. No, it wasn't you. I've said this before, that I refer to myself as a comedian sometimes. And the thing is, a good comedian... If you're making fun of the audience, you have to make sure that... Like... that everyone's laughing, and that people are not like that. Preferably, everyone's laughing together at the thing you're saying. They're not laughing at the person that you're trying to make a joke about. It's very dangerous to do, because you do it wrong, and that's not good. Better to make fun of yourself as the comedian, because you know where your limits are. Exactly, nom. Exactly. You, the streamer, or me, the streamer, decided to be here. Some among you decided to play with me in-game, but technically you're the audience. And any random stranger that appears in the game might not know they're on camera. So at the very least... you know, let them be. Or be nice. Because they might not even know. I'm the streamer? You could be. Be the person Mr. Rogers would want as a neighbor. Exactly. That's who I want to be. Time to bring out the hot tub. Oh boy. Where did everyone disappear to? Did you join a duty? Thanos happened. I think more than Thanos happened. Z-Strat says, yeah, kicking them out is a bunch of... should not happen without actual investigation, but a chat mute can at least deal with the potential issue until a human is ready, and that... whoops. That is true. That is true. That you could... that they could use a chat mute and then a GM eventually comes around. The sad thing about that, which, like, just to finish that one on WoW, is that I think at least since the release of Classic WoW, Blizzard's GMs have not been very, like, probably since before that, but Blizzard GMs have not been very visible in game for years. The hypothesis is that basically most, if not all, of the support from Blizzard and customer support is outsourced, and the people managing it don't actually know how the game works. Blizzard GMs have been invisible since Kata, I feel. I don't know. I can at least say for Kata that was the one time I ever asked for help from a GM. They didn't show up visibly, but they spoke with me and was actually a human. So, like, at least in Kata they existed. But because of that, it means that if they used a chat mute until a GM can investigate the situation, the problem is that the GM would possibly not actually understand the situation, or it might be AI. We don't even know. But with Final Fantasy XIV, where it seems like there are actual GMs, it would work. They could have like a chat mute and then a GM can investigate shortly after, because it seems like they're actually really fast, usually, like most of the time. Most of the time, I guess. I haven't had any issues with them being slow. Seen a lot of hilarious issues with people posting tickets and getting answers for something random. Yep, exactly. In WoW. And that is the problem. Hot tub stream when? For me, probably never. But that would be really funny. No worries, Angel. We should probably also round up this stream. Hot tub, but it's a hot pot and you just eat? What do you mean? It is a hot tub. I put my dinner in like an ice cream tub. So it's a hot tub. What? Are you not entertained? I thought this was what you wanted. Ten would eat again. Right. But yeah, I do think this is a good time to wrap it up. So, if you enjoyed this particular stream, it helps me a lot if you leave a like on it here on YouTube. That tells the algorithm that this was a very enjoyable stream. You'd like other people to enjoy it as well. So, thank you so much in advance. And if you'd like to be part of the Discord community server, there's a link to that. There you will find the weekly schedule where you can see what else is happening on the channel in the coming days. Notably, tomorrow we have more Savage Raid. It happens a little bit later than usual. And Saturday we have a leveling guide. So if anyone is like, some people need a new leveling guide, and I try to make sure I have an up-to-date one. So hopefully that'll help some of you. You will also find the announcement room with links to videos and streams when they come out. And if you go to the role assignments room and grab the reminder roll, you will get a notification when I post a link to either of these things, and an extra one around 15 minutes before stream starts, so you don't miss a second. So you can do that. And if you'd like to support the channel even more directly, you can become a member of the channel, you can gift memberships, you can use the super chat stuff, or if you don't want to use any of the YouTube things, there's also a Ko-Fi link in the description. It all helps support me and the channel directly so that I can do stuff like this for all of you. and we all can have fun together. So thank you so much for the support. And I think that'll be that. So, so, good night, good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are in the world, and I hope to see you all very soon. Bye bye!